do not show mercy on her. She showed no mercy when she planned, stalked, ambushed, and murdered my son in his bedroom.
Commit you to the Department of Corrections, Ms. Jackson, to the middle term of 6 years for the reasons I've stated.
In a world where justice and safety are meant to prevail, these dangerous female killers shattered the nation, from Bionca Ellis's random attack to Penelope's bizarre reactions towards the judge. The courtroom's responses to these females became battlegrounds for justice. Their haunting crimes reveal a chilling reminder of how quickly lives can be changed forever. Let's begin.
As we were parking or walking to our car, and we saw the kid.
Just do whatever you can to keep this monster behind bars.
It was a typical Monday afternoon on June 3, 2024, when police received a call. 3-year-old Julian Wood and his mother, Margot Wood, went to the Giant Eagle store on Lorraine Road in North Olmsted, Ohio. The errand seemed routine, but tragedy struck as they walked out of the store. Out of nowhere, a woman named Bionca Ellis attacked them in the parking lot with a knife. Margot and Julian both suffered serious injuries. Despite being rushed to the hospital, little Julian succumbed to his wounds. His mother survived, but the emotional scars of losing her son would remain forever. The police arrived quickly, determined to uncover what had happened. Nearby, they saw Bionca Ellis walking calmly toward Dover Center Road, holding a knife. She didn't resist arrest when officers took her into custody. As investigators worked to understand the events, they discovered something chilling. There was no connection between Ellis and the victims. This heartbreaking act of violence appeared to be completely random. Ellis was soon charged with several serious crimes, including aggravated murder and attempted murder. The news of this tragedy sent shockwaves through the community. People mourned the loss of young Julian and came together to support his grieving family, united in their desire for justice.
Not to. Well, but she did read it to you, correct? She didn't read it to you. Okay, well, we can read it in open court.
As the legal proceedings began, the case took an unexpected turn. Bionca Ellis underwent a mental health evaluation, and in September, doctors declared her incompetent to stand trial. She was diagnosed with multiple mental health disorders, leading to her placement in a treatment facility to begin rehabilitation. In November, a court hearing provided an update on her condition. The judge, after reviewing reports from medical experts, ruled the case inactive for the time being. This meant that the trial would not move forward until Ellis's mental health improved enough for her to participate in the proceedings. During the hearing, Ellis appeared on video from the treatment facility but remained silent throughout. While the medical team believed there was a chance she could be restored to competency, no one could predict how long that process might take.
Is facing murder and attempted murder charges after police say she killed 3-year-old Julian Wood.
This delay was a difficult reality for the family of young Julian, who hoped for justice to bring some form of closure. The community, still grieving the loss, held on to hope that the legal system would eventually find a way to address this senseless tragedy and honor the memory of a little boy taken far too soon. For now, the case against Bionca Ellis remains on hold as she continues treatment. The chance of her standing trial is still there, but it depends on whether her mental health improves enough for her to participate. Throughout the trial, Ellis gives bizarre reactions, smiling and shaking her head as if she has nothing to do with the hearing.
A1 and/or endangering children in violation of Ohio Revised Code Section 2919.22B2.
November 9th, that the trial date is set with respect to this case.
Julian's family, along with the community, holds on to hope that she will one day face justice for her actions. They long for answers and closure after such an unimaginable tragedy. The death of Julian Wood is a heartbreaking reminder of how unpredictable and cruel life can be. His mother, Margot, has shown immense strength in the wake of the tragedy. The community has come together to support her, offering prayers and acts of kindness. While the legal system works to navigate the complexities of this case, Julian's memory lives on in the hearts of those who loved him. His bright smile and innocence are reminders of what was lost that day.
Or extend it to the max limit possible that you can, at the very least.
The chilling randomness of Ellis's attack left a nation in mourning. However, the next case shows tragedy, and the consequences can be just as devastating.
Came over and was holding his head. Somebody was holding a wound on his leg, and then they said he stopped breathing. So somebody started CPR.
On May 28, 2015, a sunny day in San Diego, U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer Zachary Bube, 39, went for a ride on his red Ducati motorcycle. He was a man who had served his country for 20 years, a gunner's mate and part of Navy Special Warfare Command. His family described him as quick-witted, full of life, and someone whose laughter brought joy to everyone around him. But that day, his journey took a tragic turn. While riding on northbound Interstate 5 near E Street in Chula Vista, Zach encountered 27-year-old Darla Jackson driving a Nissan Altima. Witnesses reported that there was a heated argument between Darla and Zach, veering into his lane aggressively.
And was that from the beginning to the end, or just at certain points?
Yeah, from the beginning to the end.
Zach kicked the side of her car and tried to ride away, but Jackson didn't let it go. Claiming she wanted his license plate number, she began chasing him down the freeway. As the chase continued, Jackson drove recklessly, swerving and speeding to keep up with Zach. Witnesses later testified that her behavior was alarming, and her car seemed to intentionally close in on him. The encounter between Zach and Darla Jackson reached a tragic conclusion on State Road 54. As Zach tried to escape the tense situation, he weaved across lanes, attempting to take an off-ramp and put some distance between himself and Darla. However, she continued the chase, driving dangerously fast, reportedly reaching speeds of up to 95 miles per hour. In a heartbreaking moment, Darla's car struck Zach's motorcycle at 81 miles per hour. The impact sent Zach tumbling off his bike, leaving him critically injured. Emergency responders rushed him to a nearby hospital, doing everything they could to save his life.
Witness statements, it appeared that it was a deliberate and intentional act.
Despite their efforts, Zach's injuries were too severe, and he passed away just an hour later. What began as a tense road incident turned into a devastating loss, leaving Zach's loved ones and the community mourning the tragic outcome of that fateful day. Initially charged with murder, Darla Jackson claimed the incident was an accident. In 2017, she pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter, admitting her actions but maintaining she never intended to harm Zach. Despite her defense, which included claims of severe complex trauma disorder and a clean criminal record before the incident, the judge's words echoed through the courtroom as he sentenced her to 6 years in prison. As soon as Darla heard those words, the tears flowed freely and she could no longer hold back her emotions. The courtroom became filled with the sound of her sobs as Darla began to cry uncontrollably, overwhelmed by the reality of the sentence.
And he's gone. And I miss him.
His family and friends were left with an irreplaceable void, while Jackson's actions not only took a life, but also shattered her future and that of her 5-year-old daughter. Zach's family expressed their pain and disappointment in the sentence. His mother, Kathy, said, "It's extremely hard to believe that this has happened to our family."
From a mother's heart. We still find it extremely hard to believe that this has happened to our family.
The tragic death of Zach Bube serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly reckless decisions can lead to irreversible consequences. A moment of anger on the road cost a life, broke a family, and left a community mourning the loss of a beloved service member who had survived countless dangers abroad only to lose his life at home.
They just want justice for Zach, and today was a good start.
Jackson's reckless actions on the road cost a life. The next case shows how a grandmother's fear led to unspeakable violence.
My grandma shot me. Your grandpa shot you? My grandma. I'm gonna die. Help.
On May 18, 2012, chaos erupted in a quiet West Bloomfield, Michigan neighborhood. A 911 call came through from 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman, who was desperate and in pain. "My grandma shot me," he cried. His voice was filled with tears as more gunshots rang out during the call. By the time police arrived, Jonathan lay face down in gym shorts and socks with multiple gunshot wounds. His grandmother, 74-year-old Sandra Lane, met officers at the door, confessing immediately. When the prosecutor asked her during the trial, "Did you kill your grandson?" she responded, "Yes, I did." Sandra Lane, a retired teacher and grandmother, had been caring for Jonathan while his parents lived in Arizona. Jonathan was described as a troubled teen with a history of using synthetic substances. Lane claimed she bought a gun for self-protection after Jonathan's erratic behavior escalated. That day, an argument between the two spiraled out of control. Lane alleged that Jonathan threatened her and kicked her in the abdomen. Fearing for her safety, she retrieved her handgun and opened fire. Prosecutors, however, argued that the shooting was intentional, pointing out the 10 bullet casings scattered around the house and that Jonathan begged for his life before being shot again.
Guilty of the lesser offense, second-degree murder. Count 2, possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Guilty of possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony.
The trial of Lane unfolded with two very different versions of events. Lane testified that she acted in self-defense, portraying Jonathan as a troubled teenager who had become increasingly aggressive and dangerous. She argued that she had no choice but to protect herself. However, the prosecution presented a different picture, pointing out that Lane had no visible injuries that would suggest she was under immediate threat. They also highlighted the unsettling fact that she continued to shoot even after Jonathan was no longer a threat, having been incapacitated. One particularly troubling detail came to light during the trial. Lane had told her husband to leave the house before the shooting took place, which suggested she had planned the act. This raised questions about whether her actions were truly in self-defense or if they were the result of premeditation. As the trial progressed, Lane's demeanor became increasingly erratic. She could be seen shifting back and forth in her chair, as if unsure how to maintain her story. It seemed that, as the evidence mounted, she was struggling to reconcile her version of events with the reality being presented in the courtroom.
During some of the closing arguments today, Sandra Lane rocked back and forth in her chair, knowing she is close to learning any price she might have to pay.
After 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Sandra Lane guilty of second-degree murder and a firearms offense. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison for murder and an additional 2 years for using a firearm during the crime. Despite her defense's attempts to portray her as a frightened grandmother, the jury saw her actions as calculated and unforgivable.
I don't know what else to say. I just don't know. I didn't want to die in jail or prison. Please. So what? My life.
Jonathan's death shattered his family. His mother, Jennifer Hoffman, struggled to reconcile the loss of her son with the knowledge that her mother was responsible. Sandra Lane's conviction brought some closure. I'm glad that she can't harm anyone else, but the tragedy left a scar that no sentence could heal.
She's put away and she can't do harm to anybody else.
This case is a stark reminder of how conflict and a single irreversible action can destroy a family. Sandra's tragic outburst shattered her family. Our next case shows heinous acts committed by those who hide behind a badge.
Some of the notes is some of Sherry's friends said that you and her were having a problem because of the John situation.
On February 24, 1986, a nurse named Sherry Rasmussen was found dead in her Los Angeles apartment. She had been brutally attacked by someone who seemed to have a personal motive, and the crime scene was staged to look like a robbery. At first, the case went cold, but after years of investigation, new evidence surfaced. DNA at the scene eventually linked the killer to Stephanie Lazarus, a Los Angeles police officer who had previously dated Sherry's husband. Stephanie Lazarus, a seasoned detective at the time of the murder, killed Sherry after a long-standing grudge over her ex-boyfriend, Sherry's husband. Despite being a member of the police force, Lazarus kept her involvement a secret for more than 2 decades. For many years, Sherry Rasmussen's murder remained unsolved, and Stephanie Lazarus continued her life as if nothing had happened. As an LAPD officer, she maintained her position, keeping up the appearance of an upstanding citizen. But behind the badge, she carried the dark secret of what she had done. The community was left in confusion, trying to make sense of the senseless crime, while Sherry's family, devastated by the loss of their loved one, fought tirelessly for answers. They never lost hope, and their determination to seek justice never wavered. Despite the passage of time, the case remained cold, but in 2009, after more than 2 decades, a breakthrough came. DNA evidence, carefully preserved from the crime scene, was finally linked to Lazarus. The long wait for justice was over. The family, who had lived with the painful uncertainty of Sherry's death, now faced the harsh reality of the truth.
It's a DNA sample, a buccal swab, so we can identify or eliminate you. Would you be willing to do that?
Maybe. Because I know this,
After Stephanie Lazarus was arrested for the murder of Sherry Rasmussen, she denied any involvement and maintained her innocence. She told investigators that she had nothing to do with Sherry's death, but as the case unfolded, the truth started to emerge. It was discovered that on that fateful day in February 1986, Lazarus went to Sherry's apartment. There, she attacked Sherry, striking her with a vase. The violent assault didn't stop there. Lazarus then shot Sherry 3 times in the chest, using a pillow to muffle the sound of the gunshots, making it appear as though the crime was a botched robbery. Lazarus went to great lengths to stage the scene, hoping to confuse the investigators and lead them to believe it was a random crime. Despite her attempts to cover her tracks, the truth was undeniable. The case, which had once been cold, was now a story of betrayal, lies, and a crime that took far too long to uncover.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Stephanie Eileen Lazarus, guilty of the crime of murder of Sherry Rasmussen.
Lazarus was convicted of first-degree murder in 2012. During the trial, she didn't show any remorse. She gave strange reactions.
I waived time and agreed to continue your arraignment to July 6th this year.
Yes, Your Honor.
Despite her conviction, she was granted parole in 2023. But after public outcry and further examination of her case, a new review panel found good cause to reverse the decision. The family, though relieved, still struggles with the idea that Lazarus might eventually be released. The Rasmussen family felt an overwhelming sense of justice when Lazarus was initially convicted, but the reversal of her parole decision reignited their pain. Sherry's family now hopes for a final decision to keep Lazarus in prison, where they believe she belongs. The prosecutor on the Rasmussen family's behalf read their statement.
Marlise, Marie, and Sarah were so loved by our families, and they are greatly missed. We take solace in finally having the answers we have longed for.
The story of Stephanie Lazarus is a haunting reminder that even those in positions of power, like police officers, are not immune to committing horrific acts. Lazarus's case reveals how even those in power can hide dark secrets. The next case reveals how a single act of defiance leads to a dramatic turn in the story.
Actually, no.
And Soto had no prior arrests, so the judge set bail at $5,000.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
In February 2013, Penelope Soto, an 18-year-old woman from South Florida, found herself in a courtroom, facing a judge after being arrested for possession of Xanax. However, what started as a simple court appearance quickly became a national story when Soto reacted defiantly to the judge's questioning. During her court hearing, Penelope Soto was visibly affected by the Xanax she had taken earlier. She smiled and laughed while Judge Jorge Rodriguez Chomac tried to set her bond. Instead of taking the situation seriously, she joked about it. When the judge raised her bond from $5,000 to $10,000, Penelope laughed again and said sarcastically, "Are you serious?" As she began to walk away, she made a gesture by flipping the judge the middle finger and muttered a rude word.
Did you say that? Yes, sir, I did. Oh, you did say that? I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county jail.
Okay, that's fine. She said, I did say that. Look at
30 days in the county jail.
This defiant act did not go unnoticed, and the judge responded by issuing a 30-day jail sentence for contempt of court. Penelope's actions, influenced by her impaired state, led to serious consequences in the courtroom. The story took a surprising turn when Penelope Soto returned to court for a follow-up appearance. This time, she stood before the judge with tears in her eyes and offered a heartfelt apology. She admitted that her behavior had been wrong and out of line. In front of the judge, her lawyer, and her family, she openly acknowledged that her actions were irrational and not something she would normally do. Penelope expressed deep regret for her words and actions and sincerely apologized to the judge, the court, and her family for the harm she had caused. Her apology was genuine and showed that she understood the seriousness of her actions. The judge, who had initially sentenced her to jail, listened carefully to her words. He took into account that Penelope was a first-time offender and that she was willing to seek help through a substance treatment program. With this in mind, the judge decided to show leniency and dropped the 30-day jail sentence. He believed that Penelope deserved a second chance to learn from her mistakes and make positive changes in her life. This moment marked a turning point for Penelope as she began her journey to take responsibility and grow from the experience. The judge not only dismissed the 30-day jail sentence, but also waived the $10,000 bond, allowing Soto to be released immediately from the courtroom. He expressed understanding that Soto's actions were influenced by her substance use, which led her to act irrationally. The judge even hoped that this experience would serve as a valuable lesson for her.
When they will try to help you cure your addiction. Obviously you have a drug addiction, and they will help you to cure it. But they will need...
Penelope Soto's apology, coupled with the judge's forgiveness, highlighted the importance of personal accountability and the impact of substance use. Soto's tearful acknowledgement of her mistakes showed genuine remorse, while the judge's compassionate response emphasized the chance of redemption. This case serves as a reminder that while actions have consequences, acknowledging them and taking responsibility can lead to a more positive outcome.
My behavior was very irrational, and I apologize not only to the court and you, but to my family.
Up next, Isabella Martinez's shocking crime revealed a disturbing side of betrayal and vengeance, leaving a family broken.
I don't need an attorney.
You don't need an attorney?
No.
Well, I beg to disagree with you. You have a right to represent yourself. In our Constitution, you have a right to represent yourself.
On July 6, 2017, a chilling 911 call was made from a home in Loganville, Georgia. When Gwinnett County Police arrived at the scene, they found a tragic sight: 5 lives lost. The victims included her husband, Martin Romero, 33, and their 4 children: Isabella, 10, Dakota, 7, Dylan, 4, and Axel, 2. A 5th child, Diana, 9, had also been stabbed but survived after undergoing emergency surgery. The Romero family had recently moved into a quiet neighborhood in Loganville, Georgia. By all accounts, they seemed like a happy and close-knit family. The children were often seen playing with friends and were described by neighbors as bright and full of potential. However, beneath this peaceful appearance, tragedy was brewing. Isabella Martinez, the mother, reportedly sank into a deep depression after the death of her father, which seemed to change everything. On July 16, 2017, the unimaginable happened. Isabel made a 911 call admitting she had stabbed her husband and children. When police arrived, they found 5 family members dead and another child, Diana, critically injured but alive. The shock didn't end there. During her first court appearance, Isabel behaved in ways that puzzled everyone. She smiled for the cameras, gave a double thumbs up, and even knelt in a prayer-like pose. Her actions baffled the court and viewers alike. The judge sternly told her to stop, but she shook her head and laughed. When asked about legal representation, Isabel refused an attorney, saying her faith and the people would defend her. It was a chilling display in a case that left a community heartbroken and searching for answers.
A Georgia prosecutor will not seek the death penalty for a woman charged with stabbing her husband and 4 children to death. 34-year-old Isabel Martinez pled not guilty to all charges in a Gwinnett County courthouse today.
The police quickly launched a thorough investigation after the devastating discovery in Loganville. They uncovered that Isabel Martinez had brutally stabbed her family in the early hours of the morning. Shockingly, she confessed to the crimes without hesitation. However, what happened in the courtroom left everyone even more baffled. During her sentencing, Isabel's behavior was nothing short of bizarre. She smiled, waved to the cameras, and even gave a double thumbs up.
Smiling the creepiest smile, gave the jury a thumbs up, and started moving as if she was praying.
She swayed in her seat, held her hands together in a prayer gesture, and appeared completely detached from the severity of the situation. Her strange reactions unsettled everyone present, including the judge, who had to warn her to stop performing for the cameras. Many people began to question what could have driven her to commit such a horrific act. Some experts speculated that Isabel might have been struggling with severe mental health issues, perhaps triggered by the recent loss of her father. Others were left wondering how such an unimaginable tragedy could happen in a seemingly normal, happy family.
I just went cold. I couldn't believe that what had happened. I mean, when they said that there had been a tragedy, I thought maybe a car accident or something.
After a thorough trial where she showed bizarre reactions to her act, Isabel Martinez was convicted of 5 counts of murder, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. She received a life sentence with a chance of parole plus 21 years.
To cut out the display for the cameras,
The loss devastated the community, leaving family, friends, and neighbors grappling with an unimaginable tragedy. The surviving child, Diana, faced a long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. For many, this case serves as a stark reminder of the hidden pain that can lead to unimaginable actions. Breaking news! Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. Isabel's brutal attack on her family is impossible to forget. The next case shows the tragic loss of a daughter, leaving us questioning a mother's unimaginable actions.
Just be careful and watch out who you're talking to and watch out who's around you and be suspicious of everything.
On a cold November day in 2014, a tragedy unfolded in Nashua, New Hampshire that would leave a lasting impact on the community. Caitlin Marin, a 27-year-old mother, was convicted of killing her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage. The details of the case were so heart-wrenching that they would haunt everyone involved. Brielle Gage was a sweet, innocent little girl whose life ended far too soon. During Thanksgiving week in 2014, she suffered severe injuries that took her life, leaving her family and community devastated. At first, her mother, Caitlin Marin, claimed that Brielle had fallen down the stairs, but the truth was far more heartbreaking. Investigators soon uncovered a different story, revealing that Brielle had been subjected to unimaginable mistreatment. She had been kicked, punched, and even slammed against a wall. The injuries on her small body told a harrowing tale. Over 50 bruises and wounds showed just how much she had endured. Prosecutors explained that Marin's anger had spiraled out of control. They said she became enraged when Brielle had wet herself and later went to the kitchen at night to find food. What should have been simple moments of childhood became the trigger for a violent outburst.
You just can't keep the story straight. The only person afraid of the truth is her, Judge. And why? Because the truth is she's a killer.
Despite all the evidence, Marin insisted she was innocent. She chose to stand trial without a jury, putting her fate in the hands of a judge. The tragic loss of Brielle and the circumstances surrounding her death left the community in shock. During the trial, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeff Strelzin painted a grim picture of Caitlin Marin, calling her a skilled and manipulative liar. He explained how Marin had carefully tried to cover her tracks, but the truth of what happened to her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage, could not be hidden. The courtroom was heavy with sorrow as the details of Brielle's slow and painful death were revealed. Prosecutors shared how the little girl suffered more than 50 injuries, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. Among those present was Martin's mother, Kathleen Emery. She bravely spoke to the court, her voice filled with heartbreak and sorrow. Kathleen expressed her deep pain, not only for the loss of her beloved granddaughter, but also for her daughter, Caitlin. She mourned the reality that Caitlin would now spend the rest of her life behind bars, far from the life she once knew.
Mom says, no, Ma, don't touch her, don't talk to her. Her doctor said when she cries for no reason, you can't acknowledge her.
The tragedy of Brielle's death left a lasting impact on everyone. In December 2016, Marin was found guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Charles S. Temple sentenced her to 45 years to life in prison. He called Brielle's death horrific and expressed hope that her tragic story would serve as a wake-up call for society to better protect its children, while Marin showed no remorse.
I feel sorry. This is the rest of her life in prison.
Judge Temple called Brielle's death horrific.
And they say while she did talk to police before she was read her rights.
That's why when you get to the station, you don't tell her, you don't have to talk to me.
No.
And that's why you don't make any efforts to provide to her a phone to contact her attorney.
Brielle's death was a devastating reminder of how fragile and precious life is, especially for children. It sparked changes in child protection laws in New Hampshire, ensuring that Brielle's suffering would not be in vain. Though justice was served, the community will forever mourn the loss of a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon.
Pray for her family, for her siblings, because they have to live through it.
Caitlin's ruthless murder shocked the community. The next case shows an unspeakable cruelty that took us into a tragedy that took 2 young lives.
Hey, I just received a call from my child's mother that 2 of my youngest 2 dead babies, my sons are dead in an apartment.
In 2017, a heartbreaking and horrific tragedy unfolded in Atlanta when Lamora Williams, a mother of 3, killed her 2 young sons, Jakarter and Keontae. The devastating incident shocked the community and left many struggling to comprehend how a mother could commit such an unspeakable act. Lamora Williams, a 24-year-old mother of 3, called emergency services in a state of panic, saying she had found her 2 young sons dead at home after leaving them with a caregiver. Lamora described a terrible scene to the 911 dispatcher, saying that the stove had fallen onto her youngest son's head, and her other son was found on the floor with what seemed to be severe injuries. She was frantic, asking for help and insisting that she didn't know what had happened. The situation seemed tragic, and the dispatcher could hear the desperation in her voice.
I'm so scared. I don't want to get locked up because I was at work.
Okay, ma'am.
I
understand that you're scared. I completely understand, but I need to get some help out there to you now.
As police arrived and began investigating, things started to look different. The details of the scene raised more questions. The officers found the children's bodies, and some marks seemed like burns. The investigation led to a shocking discovery. The 2 boys had been placed inside a tipped-over oven and left there for an extended period. This heartbreaking revelation changed everything, and the truth about what happened that tragic day began to emerge, leaving everyone in disbelief. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities began to uncover the heartbreaking truth about what had happened. The 2 young boys had died from severe burns, and the evidence suggested that their heads had been deliberately placed inside an oven that had been tipped over. The autopsy provided even more details, showing that the boys had been exposed to extreme heat for a long time before their tragic deaths. The burns they suffered were unlike any natural accident. All the evidence began to point towards Lamora Williams, the boys' mother. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident now looked like something far more sinister. The police and investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened, and the truth about the mother's involvement in such an unimaginable crime slowly became undeniable, leaving everyone stunned and deeply saddened by the outcome.
We know she was in the building somewhere in a back room, but she chose not to appear directly in front of the judge, so you're looking at video from a previous court hearing.
Lamora Williams was arrested and charged with the murders of her 2 sons. In 2024, she was convicted on 14 counts and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, in addition to an extra 35 years for other charges related to the case. Still, she shows no remorse for her actions. She chose to remain silent during the whole trial.
Of concealing a body and 1 charge of lying to police. Williams is accused of killing her 1-year-old and 2-year-old in October by putting them in a hot oven.
The case left the community in shock and sorrow, struggling to comprehend how a mother could carry out such an unimaginable crime against her children. The heartbreak was felt by all who followed the story, especially as Williams maintained her innocence, claiming mental health issues contributed to her actions.
And it's for them. And show them that we there for him.
Lamora Williams' senseless violence shattered lives and left loved ones grappling with unimaginable loss. The next case shows how kindness can quickly turn into horror.
I am certain
de que siempre vivirá en nuestros corazones.
that she will always live in our heart.
This is the tragic story of Daniela Taveras, a 21-year-old woman whose life was abruptly cut short by an acquaintance she had just met. Daniela was killed in an unthinkable act of violence after a night out with friends from her gym, a night that was supposed to be full of fun and laughter. Daniela was a friendly, supportive member of a gym in Coral Springs, Florida. She was known for her kindness and easily made friends with everyone around her. One evening, during a gym outing, Daniela noticed that Yvonne Serrano, another gym member, had been drinking heavily. Serrano didn't seem to connect with the others, and Daniela, always the caring person, decided to offer her help. She offered to drive Serrano home after the night out. However, as the evening went on, Serrano's behavior became more intense and agitated. Her drunken state made everyone uncomfortable, and it became clear that she wasn't handling herself well. Despite the unsettling vibe, Daniela, trying to do the right thing, decided to drive Serrano home to make sure she was safe. But that decision would have devastating consequences. Hours later, police discovered Daniela's lifeless body in Serrano's driveway with a gunshot wound to her forehead. The investigation revealed the shocking truth, leaving everyone who knew Daniela in disbelief. What happened that night? What went so wrong?
Reduce the charges from second-degree murder, which would have carried a no-bond hold on it.
Prosecutors told the judge her soon-to-be ex-husband said when Serrano drinks, she blacks out.
The investigation into Daniela's death uncovered unsettling details. Yvonne Serrano, a woman with no criminal history, gave conflicting statements when questioned by the police. She first claimed that she didn't know how Daniela's body ended up in her driveway. Serrano told officers that she had found Daniela's car there when she was leaving for the gym, but her story began to change. As the investigation continued, Serrano admitted that she had been at the bar that night, drinking heavily. She told the police that she had blacked out, making her memory of the night fuzzy. Her story seemed inconsistent, and the authorities began to suspect her involvement. Further investigation revealed troubling evidence in Serrano's home. A gun was found, and there were signs that she had deleted footage from her Ring doorbell camera, which might have captured crucial moments. The discovery of this evidence raised more questions about Serrano's role in Daniela's tragic death. The inconsistencies in Serrano's statements, combined with the physical evidence, left investigators believing she had a part in what happened that fateful night. Daniela's family and friends were left searching for answers, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had stolen Daniela's life.
Or to give the suspect a ride home. She gave her a ride home. The vehicle pulls in the driveway, and at some point the suspect did shoot the victim and kill her.
Serrano was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with evidence. However, prosecutors later reduced the charges to manslaughter with a firearm, a lesser charge that carries a maximum 30-year sentence. Serrano pleaded not guilty, that she's not guilty of her act, leaving Daniela's family and friends devastated by the turn of events. Despite the change in charges, Daniela's mother, Isa, and those who knew Daniela continued to seek justice for her tragic death.
Good morning, Ms. Serrano. You're charged with 2 counts. The first is tampering or fabricating with physical evidence. The second is second-degree murder.
The story of Daniela Taveras' untimely death has left a deep emotional mark on her family and friends. Daniela's mother, Isa, finds herself grappling with anger and frustration, knowing that no matter what happens in court, her daughter will never return.
Estamos a la espera de la sentencia.
Isabel Taveras, the victim's mother, said she watched while a jury spent more than 2.5 days deliberating before arriving to the guilty verdict.
Yvonne's heinous case leaves everyone in shock and disbelief. The next case exposed shocking cruelty that caused irreversible damage.
Happen without her? Absolutely not. She's the way that they get into the apartment. She never would have opened the door for Michelle Lambert. She helps tackle her. She holds her down while Lambert's stabbing her to death.
In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Tabitha Buck was sentenced to life in prison for the 1991 murder of 16-year-old Lori Sho. Buck, just 17 years old at the time of the crime, along with her accomplice, Lisa Michelle Lambert, lured Sho's mother out of their apartment and brutally slashed Sho's throat. After nearly 28 years in prison, Tabitha Buck was recently released on parole, which has sparked a lot of debate and emotions. Tabitha Buck's story intertwines with Lori Sho's, which began as a typical tale of small-town life, but ended in an unthinkable tragedy. In the summer of 1991, Lori, a bright and kind teenager, briefly dated Lawrence Butch Yunkin. However, Lori later confided to her mother that Yunkin had harmed her. Their relationship ended, and Yunkin returned to Lisa Michelle Lambert, his pregnant ex-girlfriend. For Lambert, Lori became an obsession. Driven by jealousy, she began harassing Lori, showing up at her workplace and spreading rumors. Lambert's friend, Tabitha Buck, joined in the aggression. Buck physically attacked Lori multiple times, including a violent confrontation at a mall. Lambert's malice turned methodical. With Buck's help, she gathered information about Lori's schedule and obtained her phone number. On December 20th, 1991, Lori was brutally attacked at her home. Her mother, Hazel, had been lured away by a staged phone call. Lori sustained fatal injuries, but managed to identify Lambert as her killer before succumbing. Police arrested Lambert, Buck, and Yunkin that day. Lori's death remains a haunting reminder of how jealousy and hatred can spiral into violence. Tabitha Buck was granted parole after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. This ruling meant that her sentence was revisited, giving her a chance for release after serving nearly 28 years in prison. Some people believe that everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who were young when they committed their crimes. They feel that Tabitha's time in prison allowed her to change and learn from her mistakes. However, for the families affected by her actions, this decision is difficult to accept. The Show family, in particular, is left facing old wounds as they remember the brutal crime that took Lori Show's life.
But a very, very effective one, the odds of my client meeting a personality like that, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1.
Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman shared how painful it has been for victims' families, even though the court was just following the law. The decision raises a complex issue. Should someone who committed a serious crime as a juvenile be given a second chance? While the law sees potential for rehabilitation, the emotional weight for those who have suffered from the crime remains heavy. This situation leaves everyone questioning the balance between justice, healing, and the hope for redemption. Tabitha Buck's parole was granted after she showed good behavior during her time in prison, completed programs to improve herself, and took responsibility for the crime she committed. Despite these positive steps, she must follow strict rules now that she's out. She's not allowed to have contact with anyone who uses substances or with the family of the victim, Lori Show. She must also attend regular mental health evaluations and, importantly, she can't go back or even visit Lancaster County, where the crime happened. Some people believe that this is a fair chance for Buck to rebuild her life, especially since she was so young when she committed the crime. However, others feel unsure about whether someone who took the life of another person, especially so brutally, should be allowed back into society. For the victim's family and others affected, it's hard to accept that someone who caused so much pain could now be free. It's a complex situation where the law offers a second chance, but it still leaves many with mixed emotions and questions about justice and forgiveness.
Tabitha Buck was 17 years old when she was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal killing of 16-year-old Lori Show in Lancaster County.
Tabitha Buck is now a free woman, but her release doesn't erase the trauma caused by her actions all those years ago. While she serves her parole under strict conditions, the emotional scars for the Show family and others affected by the case remain. This case highlights the complexity of juvenile justice and whether it's possible for someone to truly change after committing such a crime.
The surviving family members were told that the sentence was final, and in cases like this, that it was life without parole. And
Tabitha's journey ahead will not only be one of legal challenges, but emotional healing for all involved. The emotional reaction to Buck's release is mixed. For some, it brings hope that people can change, even after making terrible mistakes. For others, it feels like a reminder of the deep pain caused by the loss of a young life. The release of someone who committed such a violent crime against another person is difficult for many to accept, particularly for the victim's family, who are left to process the hurt once again. Next, we turn to the heartbreaking and disturbing case of Susan Smith, a mother who shocked the nation with her tragic actions and the devastating consequences that followed.
God gives us free choice, and she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do.
On October 25, 1994, Susan Smith called the police in Union, South Carolina, with a heart-wrenching claim. She said a man had carjacked her vehicle, taking her 2 young sons, 3-year-old Michael and 1-year-old Alexander, with him. The world was captivated as Susan appeared on national TV, tearfully begging for her children's safe return. For 9 long days, the nation watched and waited, clinging to the hope that Susan Smith's 2 little boys, Michael and Alexander, would be found safe. Susan, their heartbroken mother, appeared on television, pleading tearfully for their return. Her sorrow seemed genuine, and the world rallied behind her. But behind the grief-stricken face lay a disturbing secret. From the very beginning, investigators sensed something wasn't right. They carefully analyzed Susan's story and found key inconsistencies. One glaring issue was her description of the supposed carjacking. Susan claimed she had been stopped at a red light in an empty intersection when a man forced her out of the car and drove off with her children. However, investigators quickly realized the traffic light wouldn't have turned red unless another vehicle had been present, something Susan never mentioned.
Susan Smith is convicted for their deaths and sentenced to 30 years in prison.
As the pressure mounted, Susan broke down and confessed. The heartbreaking truth emerged. She had driven her car to John D. Long Lake with her sons strapped in their car seats. She let the car roll into the water, drowning her children. Her shocking motive is that she wanted to start a new life with a wealthy man who didn't want kids. It was a revelation that shattered the nation. The discovery of Michael and Alexander's bodies in the lake left the nation heartbroken. For days, people had hoped the little boys would be found safe. But that hope was shattered when their lifeless bodies were recovered from the depths of John D. Long Lake. Susan Smith's car, submerged 122 feet from the shore, became a haunting symbol of the crime. When questioned, Susan claimed she had been overwhelmed by emotional pain and insisted she hadn't planned to harm her children. Her confession shocked everyone who had watched her tearful public pleas just days before. In 1995, Susan's trial gripped the nation. Her defense team described her as a deeply troubled woman battling severe depression, trying to explain how a mother could commit such a terrible act. They argued she wasn't thinking clearly and was overwhelmed by despair. The prosecution, however, painted a different picture. They claimed Susan's actions were calculated, motivated by her desire to pursue a relationship with a man who didn't want children. After hearing all the evidence, it took the jury just 2.5 hours to reach a verdict: guilty of 2 counts of murder.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children.
Though prosecutors sought the death penalty, the jury sentenced Susan to life in prison with the chance of parole after 30 years. She remains incarcerated at the Leith Correctional Institution, where her 2024 parole request was denied.
Has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander.
As the judge announced Susan's sentence, a profound sense of shame clouded her features. Her voice trembled as she spoke, acknowledging the horribleness of her actions. With a tear-streaked face, she admitted how deeply remorseful she felt for what she had done, especially to her children. Her hands clenched as if holding on to the remnants of the guilt that weighed her down.
And I love Michael and Alex with all my heart.
The case of Susan Smith is a haunting reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences of a desperate mind. It's a story that still stirs deep sorrow and outrage, leaving a scar on the hearts of all who remember.
Now she wants a chance to be free after only serving 30 years. No. Life should mean life.
The Susan Smith case shook the nation's trust to its core, but the next case reveals a reckless action that forever changed lives. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description.
Or you're stone cold sober and you have a seizure every single day, and yet you still choose to get in a car and drive. I honestly don't know which one is worse.
On August 10th, 2017, a tragic crash occurred on the Lee Roy Shellman Expressway in Tampa, Florida. That day, Louise and Rita Philippak, along with their 8-year-old daughter Georgia, lost their lives in an accident that shook the community. At the center of this devastation was 31-year-old Amber Pereira, whose actions would forever alter countless lives. On a tragic night, Amber Pereira was speeding down the road in her Kia, driving at an alarming 120 miles per hour. In a split second, she collided with the back of the Philippak family's Hyundai, sending their car spinning across the median into oncoming traffic. The car crashed into 2 other vehicles before bursting into flames. Sadly, the Philippak family, 3 members in total, lost their lives at the scene. Another driver was also injured in the chaos. Instead of stopping to offer help, Amber continued driving, not realizing the gravity of what had just happened. She drove for 2 more miles before her car broke down. When authorities caught up with her, they discovered that Amber's blood alcohol level was far above the legal limit, and there were also traces of cannabis in her system. This devastating accident took the lives of an entire family and left another person severely injured. The consequences of Amber's reckless actions would be felt by everyone who loved the Philippak family, and the community was left in shock over the preventable tragedy. It serves as a sobering reminder of how driving under the influence can lead to irreversible, heartbreaking consequences.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
During the investigation, Amber Pereira tried to explain the crash by claiming she had suffered a seizure just before the collision. However, the evidence told a different story. Data from her car's recorder revealed that she had made several attempts to steer and avoid the impact, suggesting she was fully aware of what was happening at the time. After the crash, Amber was taken to the hospital, but even there, she tried to hide blood samples in an attempt to avoid further legal trouble. Her actions only added to the growing mountain of evidence against her. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Amber's reckless driving, under the influence of alcohol and substances, had led to the tragic deaths of 3 innocent people and the serious injury of another. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Amber finally pleaded guilty to 9 charges, including 3 counts of DUI manslaughter and leaving the scene of a crash involving death. Her guilty plea marked the beginning of a long legal battle, but the consequences of her actions were already painfully clear. This tragedy serves as a powerful reminder of the devastating impact of impaired driving and the importance of being responsible behind the wheel.
The emotion got the best of Amber Pereira throughout the 3-hour hearing. At times, she dropped her head into her hands in despair.
On October 22, 2019, Circuit Judge Christopher Sabella sentenced Pereira to 50 years in prison. While her attorney argued for leniency, citing her minimal criminal history, the judge and the victim's family felt justice demanded a harsher sentence.
Sentenced the 31-year-old to 5 decades behind bars.
Your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and ended 3 lives.
As the judge's words echoed through the courtroom, a wave of emotion swept over Amber, her heart heavy with guilt. The weight of each sentence sank deep into her soul, and tears began to fall. Every word seemed to magnify her regret, the burden of her actions pressing down on her more than ever.
Moments ago, Amber Pereira found out how long she'll spend in prison for killing a family in a deadly crash.
This tragic story leaves a lasting impact, reminding us of the irreversible consequences of reckless decisions. For the Felipek family, no sentence could bring back their loved ones. For Pereira, her life is now a stark reflection of the cost of one fateful choice.
Not going to make it through the crash, and that my children were going to lose their mother.
Amber's reckless driving highlights how quickly tragedy can strike. But the next story takes manipulation and betrayal to an even darker level.
Because of a prison writing group saying that deflecting blame was a coping mechanism.
On May 1st, 1990, Pamela Smart returned to her New Hampshire home to find her condo ransacked and her husband, Gregory Smart, brutally murdered. To everyone around her, Pamela appeared to be a grieving widow, shocked by the apparent burglary gone wrong. However, the police soon unraveled a chilling truth hidden behind her composed exterior. At the age of 22, Pamela found herself in a complicated relationship with a much younger Billy Flynn, who was only 15 years old. Billy, feeling deeply connected to Pamela, was manipulated by her into doing something he never imagined. Pamela, in a bid to end her unhappy marriage, convinced Billy that her love depended on him taking drastic action. She told him she would withhold affection unless he helped her remove her husband, Gregory, from the picture. Billy, overwhelmed by his emotions, turned to his 3 friends for assistance. Together, they hatched a plan, and one fateful night, Billy shot Gregory while one of his friends, Randall, held him down. The scene initially appeared as though a robbery had gone wrong, but as detectives pieced together the details, they started to see a different story. A breakthrough came when Pamela's co-worker, Cecilia Pierce, stepped in to help. Wearing a wire, Cecilia recorded Pamela's own words, which revealed the truth behind the crime. This critical evidence helped investigators uncover the shocking truth and brought Pamela's manipulation to light, leading to her eventual arrest.
Well, we went upstairs, Pete and I, and right into Pam's room. We started dumping out the drawers and everything, so it looked like a burglary.
Pamela's trial grabbed the attention of the entire nation because it was one of the first in U.S. history to allow cameras in the courtroom. The prosecutors argued that Pamela was a manipulative person who used her charm to control a vulnerable teenager, Billy Flynn. They claimed she wanted to avoid a messy divorce and take advantage of her husband's $140,000 life insurance policy. Pamela's defense team argued that she didn't know about the murder plot and had no part in it. However, the recordings made by her co-worker, Cecilia, and the testimonies from Billy and his friends told a different story. These pieces of evidence showed that Pamela had played a big role in planning the crime. After a trial that lasted 14 days, the jury found Pamela guilty of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and witness tampering. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with no chance of ever being released. Pamela's case became a cautionary tale about manipulation and the dangerous consequences of taking advantage of others.
Is that Cecilia Pierce and Bill Flynn are having all these conversations about the murder of your husband, which you know absolutely nothing about. Is that it?
Yes, they testified to that also.
To this day, Pamela maintains her innocence, claiming she never wanted her husband dead. However, her life behind bars has been tumultuous. From enduring a violent assault by fellow inmates to being the subject of media documentaries, Pamela remains a controversial figure. In March 2023, her last appeal for a sentence reduction was denied, sealing her fate to live out her days in prison. During the whole trial, Pamela showed no remorse for her act.
Who is from New Hampshire, is serving a life sentence without parole for plotting with a 15-year-old to kill her husband back in 1990. William Flynn served a 25-year sentence for the shooting death.
Was killing your husband one of those mistakes?
No, it wasn't.
Acknowledged for the first time in my own, mind and my own heart how responsible I was.
Along with it, Billy also gets emotional and says sorry to Gregory's family for what he did. The story of Pamela Smart left many in shock and disbelief.
I felt a tremendous amount of shame.
The case serves as a grim reminder of the devastating consequences of manipulation, betrayal, and blind infatuation. While Gregory's life was tragically cut short, the ripple effects of his crime continue to haunt everyone involved. Pamela Smart's cunning manipulation left lives in ruins, but the next case unveils a chilling story of betrayal that cuts even deeper.
You've caused untold damage to our lives, yours, and others.
On November 14, 2020, the quiet town of Casco Township in Allegan County was rocked by a horrifying discovery. A charred vehicle, near which lay the burned remains of 25-year-old David Silverlight, was found. What initially seemed like a tragic accident quickly turned into a murder investigation that unveiled dark secrets and a deadly conspiracy. David Silverlight, a resident of the South Haven area, had once been in a relationship with Allison Martin. Although their romantic relationship had ended, Allison's connection to David remained in unexpected ways. When David's body was discovered, burned and abandoned, police quickly suspected something was wrong. It didn't seem like an accident, and they soon began looking into the people who were closest to him. As the investigation unfolded, authorities began to suspect Allison and her friend Justin Terpstra were involved. The two were eventually linked to the crime, and it became clear that something far darker had taken place. Allison, at 23 years old, and Justin, at 25, were both arrested and charged with open murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The charges they faced were serious, as they carried the chance of life in prison. The community was shocked by the crime, and the case would later be a reminder of how even familiar relationships can sometimes take a dangerous turn. Investigators continued their work to understand the full story behind David's tragic death. The investigation into David Silverlight's death uncovered some truly unsettling details. Just 4 days after his body was found, it was confirmed that David had been murdered. It turned out that Allison Martin and her friend Justin Terpstra had made a deadly plan together. They decided to kill David and try to hide the evidence by burning his body along with his car. The news of the crime sent shockwaves through the community, leaving many in disbelief that something so tragic could happen so close to home. David's family was heartbroken, struggling to understand why anyone would harm him. As the case moved forward, it became even more difficult to process. During the preliminary hearings, Allison was evaluated and found to be mentally fit to stand trial. This development added even more weight to the case, as it became clear that the crime had been carefully planned and carried out. The community, along with David's loved ones, hoped for justice as they watched the case unfold. The shocking event served as a reminder of how quickly relationships can turn dark, and how important it is to stay vigilant about the people we trust.
The life sentence without parole was prescribed by law, so today's hearing is mostly a chance for Brandon Silverlight's family to vent their anger on the woman they say.
Allison's preliminary hearing concluded that there was enough evidence to move the case to trial. Although Justin's hearing was delayed due to competency evaluations, both defendants would eventually face the full extent of the law for their heinous crime. At the time of the hearing, Allison gets emotional and starts crying. This case is a haunting reminder of how relationships, when marred by conflict and malice, can take a dark turn. David's tragic death left a void in his loved ones' lives, while the community of Casco Township was left grappling with the horror of what had unfolded in their midst. Justice for David now lies in the hands of the courts, but the emotional scars left behind will take far longer to heal.
Yeah, he was a really nice guy, really friendly, outgoing. He was really into playing drums. I believe he played with the University of Western Michigan marching band. He also taught marching percussion to high school students, and that was really one of his passions.
Next, the case of Lisa Montgomery, whose tragic story sheds light on a lifetime of harm, culminating in a crime that stunned the nation.
Turns out Lisa Montgomery was never pregnant. She was a killer who fed those around her a pack of lies. Investigators, and even her husband, There was no birth. It was murder and kidnapping.
In December 2004, the small town of Skidmore, Missouri became the backdrop for one of the most harrowing crimes in modern history. Lisa Montgomery, a seemingly ordinary woman with a tragic past, would commit an act of unimaginable brutality. She wasn't just a killer, she was a predator hiding in plain sight, meticulously planning a crime so heinous that it shocked even seasoned investigators. Lisa's victim, Bobby Jo Stinnett, was a 23-year-old expecting mother whose kindness proved fatal. Montgomery had posed as a buyer interested in Bobby Jo's prized show dogs, gaining her trust through friendly emails and phone calls. But behind this facade was a calculated scheme. Lisa arrived at Bobby Jo's home under the guise of a meeting, carrying not excitement but sinister intent. With cold determination, Lisa attacked Bobby Jo, strangling her in a struggle that left the young woman fighting desperately for her life. But the horror didn't stop there.
Montgomery researched how to perform a C-section. She made a dry run to Skidmore the day before the murder. Montgomery brought umbilical cord clamps, a rope, and a knife to the Skidmore house.
Lisa used a kitchen knife to cut Bobby Jo's baby from her womb, leaving the young mother lifeless and the baby stolen. Her goal? To pass off the child as her own, an act fueled by years of lies about pregnancies and a desperate attempt to salvage her crumbling personal life.
I have no sympathy for Lisa Montgomery for what she did. That was the most monstrous act I can think of.
After fleeing the scene with the newborn, Lisa returned to Kansas, proudly displaying the baby to those around her. She concocted stories about giving birth herself, convincing even her husband of the falsehood. Meanwhile, Bobby Jo's lifeless body was discovered by her mother, who placed a frantic call to authorities. A massive manhunt ensued, with the FBI tracing Lisa's online communications to Bobby Jo. The following day, Lisa was arrested. The baby, miraculously unharmed, was safely returned to her father.
Diane and other advocates say Lisa Montgomery was brutally tortured throughout her life, beaten, raped, and neglected.
In court, the details of Lisa's troubled life emerged. She had endured severe physical-emotional harm as a child, leaving deep psychological scars. Her defense team argued that these experiences, combined with mental health struggles, had driven her to commit such an atrocity. Despite these revelations, the jury was unmoved by her pleas. Lisa was convicted of kidnapping resulting in death, and in 2021, she became the first woman in nearly 7 decades to be executed by the federal government.
This case has finally come to a close, but we will never stop missing Bobby Jo. She was a sweet and loving wife, daughter, and sister, and would have been a wonderful mother.
The courtroom was heavy with grief and anger as Bobby Jo's family delivered their impact statements. Her mother, choking back tears, described the unimaginable pain of losing her daughter in such a brutal way. The judge, too, expressed his disgust at the calculated nature of Lisa's crime. Even in her final moments, Lisa displayed no remorse, maintaining a distant and detached demeanor, leaving those present to grapple with the monstrous act that tore a family apart. Breaking news! Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. The next case takes us into a world of betrayal and manipulation. Sabrina Zunich, a foster child whose actions stunned her community.
17-year-old foster daughter Sabrina Zunich is on top of Lisa in a violent rage, stabbing the woman who gave her a new home.
What is going on? What is going on?
In the quiet suburb of Willoughby Hills, Ohio, a disturbing murder shattered the fragile trust between a foster child and her caregiver. Sabrina Zunich, a seemingly ordinary teenager, harbored a secret relationship with her foster father, Kevin Knafel, a relationship that would ultimately fuel a horrifying crime. What started as a rescue story for a troubled teen ended in a calculated plan to eliminate an innocent life.
It was, by all accounts, a stable and happy household. Lisa was a social worker who worked in the sex abuse department, while Kevin was often on the road as a trucker. It seemed like the perfect environment for a foster child.
Lisa Knafel, Sabrina's foster mother, was known for her kind and nurturing nature. She welcomed Sabrina into her home, unaware of the darkness brewing behind closed doors. Kevin manipulated Sabrina, convincing her that Lisa was the source of their problems and the obstacle in their relationship. Under Kevin's influence, Sabrina's emotions spiraled, and the foster family's home became a battleground of betrayal and deceit. In the early morning hours of November 16, 2012, Sabrina entered Lisa's bedroom armed with a knife. Lisa, who was asleep beside her 3-year-old daughter, woke to the attack but had no chance against the ferocity of her assailant. Sabrina stabbed Lisa over 150 times, a horrifying act of violence that stunned even seasoned investigators. As investigators pieced together the crime, Shocking details emerged. Sabrina confessed to the murder but claimed Kevin orchestrated the plan, manipulating her with promises of love and shared happiness. Phone records, texts, and testimony revealed Kevin's chilling role in grooming Sabrina for the murder, convincing her that this heinous act was the only way to secure their future together.
What was his relationship to you?
It was when a foster father when needed to be, and when a lover when not being a foster father.
The evidence painted a damning picture. Kevin had preyed on Sabrina's vulnerabilities, using her troubled past to mold her into a pawn for his twisted desires. The courtroom became a theater of anguish as Sabrina detailed Kevin's manipulation, and prosecutors argued that she was both victim and perpetrator in this horrifying tale.
Zunich told the jury that after Kevin Knaefel seduced her and began a sexual relationship with her, he convinced her to kill his wife so that he could collect $785,000 in insurance policies he had on Lisa Knaefel's life.
Sabrina Zunich pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, receiving a sentence of 30 years to life. Kevin Knaefel was convicted of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 30 years. The legal system delivered justice, but the emotional scars left on Lisa's family and community would remain. The courtroom was a mix of raw emotion and quiet horror. Sabrina, visibly distraught during her sentencing, apologized to Lisa's family, but her words did little to heal the wounds inflicted by her actions. Lisa's surviving family members, including her young daughter, expressed their grief and anger, condemning Kevin's betrayal and Sabrina's ultimate choice to carry out the crime. The community, once a symbol of safety, was left to grapple with the reality that darkness can infiltrate even the most trusting of households. The case became a chilling reminder of the power of manipulation and the devastating consequences of unchecked control. Now, we shift focus to Karla Faye Tucker, whose brutal crime and unexpected transformation behind bars made her one of the most controversial figures in Texas history.
What are you going to be thinking about if you face execution?
I want to be thinking about certainly what it's like in heaven.
Of course, they rousted them out of bed, and of course the girl's screaming and pleading for her life, and both of them are. Karla just went crazy. I mean, she just went crazy.
In 1983, Karla Faye Tucker, a young woman with a troubled past, shocked Texas with a crime so brutal it left the public reeling. Known for her wild lifestyle fueled by substances and recklessness, Karla and her accomplice, Daniel Garrett, committed a gruesome double murder that would become one of the most infamous cases in the state's history. But what followed in her journey added an unexpected twist to her story. On a June night in Houston, Karla and Garrett broke into a home, driven by rage and a chaotic plan to steal a motorcycle. Inside, they encountered Jerry Lynn Dean, who Karla despised for personal reasons, and Deborah Thornton, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Armed with a hammer and a pickaxe, the pair unleashed a savage attack. Karla herself would later admit to delivering the fatal blows to both victims, describing the act with chilling indifference.
She said that she basically achieved an orgasm every time she swung the pickaxe and landed it.
She told me that.
Do you believe that?
She told me that. I asked her that same question.
Adding to the horror, Karla claimed she felt a surge of joy during the crime, a statement that would haunt her trial and cement her image as a remorseless killer. For the victims' families, the sheer brutality was incomprehensible, leaving a void that could never be filled. The evidence against Karla was overwhelming. Fingerprints, witness testimonies, and her own confession painted a damning picture. Prosecutors described her as the epitome of evil, pointing to her lack of remorse during the trial. However, after being sentenced to death, something unexpected happened. While on death row, Karla claimed to have undergone a spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity and becoming a model inmate.
It took me a while to believe that Karla had found the Lord.
What mostly hit me was his love. His love that just...
Her public pleas for clemency sparked a global debate. Advocates, including prominent religious leaders, argued she had genuinely reformed and no longer posed a threat to society. But the victims' families and the state of Texas stood firm, believing that justice demanded her execution. On February 3, 1998, Karla Faye Tucker was executed by lethal injection, becoming the first woman to be put to death in Texas in over a century. In her final moments, Karla maintained her newfound faith, offering apologies to the victims' families and expressing hope for forgiveness. Her execution divided the nation, raising questions about the nature of redemption, justice, and whether true change is enough to outweigh past sins.
No, I'm not. I'm not afraid of dying. I mean, I know where I'm going. I know that Jesus has already gone to prepare a place for me. I know that if I have to go February 3rd, that he's going to come and he's going to escort me personally. I believe that.
The courtroom and public reactions to Karla's case were a mix of outrage and compassion. For some, her transformation was a testament to the possibility of redemption, even for those who commit unthinkable crimes. For others, her newfound faith couldn't erase the horrors of her actions or the devastation she caused. The victims' families remained steadfast, describing her death as a long overdue act of justice. Now let's turn our attention to Sheila LaBarre, a woman whose manipulative and violent tendencies turned her rural New Hampshire farm into a place of terror.
She's literally burning a body in her front yard.
Yes.
On a public roadway.
Yes. Yes.
Just whose remains are burning in that front yard fire? And is the woman who lives here a gold digger or a grave digger?
In the seemingly quiet town of Epping, New Hampshire, a picturesque farm concealed the horrifying reality of Sheila LaBarre's reign of terror. Her property, known to locals for its charm, became a house of horrors where young men entered but many never left. Behind her warm demeanor lurked a manipulative and sadistic killer, whose twisted motives would leave a community shattered. LaBarre's victims were carefully chosen, young, vulnerable men, often down on their luck, who were drawn to her through promises of care and stability. Once under her control, these men became prisoners in a psychological and physical nightmare. LaBarre used mental manipulation and harm to isolate her victims, making them dependent on her before subjugating them to unimaginable cruelty. She filmed her acts of torment, a chilling record of her ability to inflict pain without remorse. Among her victims was Kenneth County, a young man with developmental challenges. Lured by LaBarre's charm, he quickly found himself trapped in her web of sadistic violence. In 2006, neighbors began noticing strange bonfires on LaBarre's farm and a series of erratic behaviors that raised alarm bells. A concerned citizen contacted authorities, leading to a welfare check on her property. What police uncovered was beyond belief. They discovered evidence of violent assaults, including Kenneth County's blood-soaked mattress and personal belongings. LaBarre had already disposed of his body by burning it in one of her infamous fires. Further investigation revealed charred remains of multiple victims, each pointing to a grim pattern of harm, murder, and destruction. LaBarre accepted guilt, claiming her victims were who deserved punishment, despite zero evidence supporting her assertions. Her unfounded justifications painted a chilling portrait of a killer detached from reality. LaBarre was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder. Her trial exposed the depths of her depravity, as prosecutors detailed the torture her victims endured. Jurors were shown her self-incriminating videos, which highlighted her lack of empathy and enjoyment of control.
She had already admitted to the murders. Her sentence is mandatory.
I hereby sentence you to 2 life in prison without the possibility of parole sentences at the New Hampshire State Prison, and you are remanded to the custody of the sheriff.
In court, LaBarre appeared defiant and unapologetic, often smirking and showing no acknowledgement of the lives she destroyed. Her defense attempted to argue diminished capacity, pointing to her troubled childhood and history of mental illness. The jury rejected these claims, sentencing her to life in prison without parole. For the families of the victims, the trial offered little solace. They expressed profound anger and sorrow, speaking of the young lives robbed by LaBarre's cruelty. One relative described the farm as a death trap disguised as a sanctuary, a chilling metaphor for LaBarre's manipulative nature. Her lack of remorse only deepened the wounds, leaving a haunting reminder of the horrors hidden beneath her charming facade. Our next case takes us to Australia, where Kelly Lane's web of lies and unsettling actions left a nation in disbelief.
Is Tegan Lane dead or alive? She was last seen as a 2-day-old leaving a Sydney hospital with her mother Kelly, an aspiring Australian Olympian.
A former water polo champion with a seemingly perfect life, Kelly Lane harbored a dark secret. Beneath her polished exterior lay a web of deception so intricate it would take years to unravel. The story of Lane's missing baby, Tegan, stunned Australia and revealed a chilling mystery that remains unsolved to this day. In 1996, Lane gave birth to her second child, Tegan, at Auburn Hospital in Sydney. Just 2 days later, the baby vanished without a trace. Lane initially claimed she had given Tegan to the child's biological father, but as police dug deeper, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Lane had hidden multiple pregnancies from her family and friends, delivering babies in secret and placing them for adoption. However, Tegan's case was different. There was no record of adoption, no father stepping forward, and no explanation of where the infant had gone. As investigators pressed her for answers, Lane's story began to change. She provided conflicting accounts of Tegan's whereabouts, each more far-fetched than the last. Why would a mother go to such extreme lengths to hide the truth?
Did you kill the child?
No, I did not. I did not do anything like that.
In 2010, after years of suspicion and investigation, Lane stood trial for Tegan's murder. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of a woman desperate to protect her image, willing to do anything to erase evidence of her secret child.
But I'm still not sure why you have to discuss. You asked me here to talk about Tegan. I'm confused now.
I want to get to the truth.
The courtroom was captivated as Lane's facade cracked under scrutiny. Witnesses described her obsession with maintaining appearances and her refusal to address Tegan's disappearance. The prosecution argued that Lane had killed Tegan shortly after leaving the hospital, driven by fear of her reputation being tarnished.
The natural father of the child is an Andrew Morris, is that correct?
That's correct.
But in a second interview more than 2 years later, she told them it could be Andrew Norris.
Lane maintained her innocence, repeatedly claiming she had handed Tegan over to the father, a man she refused to identify. But with no solid evidence of adoption and inconsistencies in her testimony, the jury had to confront the most unsettling possibility. Tegan was gone, and Kelly Lane knew exactly why. Kelly Lane was convicted of Tegan's murder and sentenced to 18 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 13 years. The verdict sent shockwaves across Australia, leaving a nation grappling with the horrifying reality of the case. Despite her conviction, Lane has continued to proclaim her innocence, even launching appeals to clear her name. The mystery of Tegan's disappearance lingers, haunting the minds of investigators, the public, and Tegan's biological father, whose identity remains a mystery. In court, Tegan's absence was obvious. There was no body, no tangible proof of her fate, only the aching void left behind by unanswered questions. Family members of Lane's other children expressed their anguish, struggling to reconcile the Kelly Lane they knew with the woman convicted of such a heinous crime. The case serves as a stark reminder of how appearances can mask unthinkable acts. A mother's love should be unconditional, yet Tegan's story ended in darkness, with the truth buried alongside her. Next, we uncover the case of Lisa Dykes, whose role in a web of betrayal and violence left lasting scars and raised chilling questions about trust and deceit.
A woman on trial for killing a 23-year-old in a jealous rage may testify today.
Charges against 2 others in the case were dropped. Fox 4's Dan Godwin is live with the latest.
In October 2020, 23-year-old Maricela Botello traveled from Seattle to Dallas for a visit. But her trip took a tragic turn after a night out in Deep Ellum. She vanished, leaving her family and friends desperate for answers. Months later, her body was found in a rural area near Wilmer, Texas, marking the beginning of a harrowing investigation. The tragedy began months later, when investigators discovered her body in a remote area near Wilmer, Texas, unraveling a disturbing tale. The investigation led authorities to Lisa Dykes, her wife Nina Morano, and rapper Charles Beltran. Prosecutors revealed a tragic sequence of events, suggesting that Dykes, overcome by jealousy, attacked Maricela after finding her with Beltran.
Prosecutors say Dykes killed Botello in a jealous rage in October 2020 because she found Botello in bed with her boyfriend.
They claimed the situation escalated into a fatal confrontation. Evidence indicated that Dykes and Morano were working together to conceal the crime, disposing of Maricela's body in a desolate area. While Dykes and Morano were described as being in a unique relationship with Beltran, Dykes denied this, stating her ties to Beltran were limited to supporting his music career.
He says he somewhat lacked family stability, he did not graduate high school, and he was in and out of jail. Now, he says he did not commit this murder of Maricela Botello. He says he was just a witness.
Despite her claims, investigators found messages and GPS evidence connecting her to the crime scene. This heartbreaking case left Maricela's family grieving the loss of a beloved daughter and sister, while justice sought to bring closure to their pain. As the investigation unfolded, prosecutors presented a strong case against Lisa Dykes and Nina Morano. Using GPS data, they showed that both women had been near the rural area where 23-year-old Maricela Botello's body was later found. This evidence directly contradicted Dykes' claim that she and Morano were merely visiting a FedEx distribution center nearby. Adding to the puzzle, text messages and witness testimonies painted a troubling picture of the events leading up to Maricela's tragic death. Prosecutors argued that jealousy and anger had motivated Dykes' actions, providing further evidence to support their claims. In a dramatic twist, after their initial arrest, Dykes and Morano managed to disable their court-ordered ankle monitors and fled the country. They traveled to Cambodia, where they later claimed they were seeking a fresh start and felt unfairly treated. Their escape only heightened the tension surrounding the case, as it raised questions about their motives and accountability. Despite their efforts to evade justice, the legal system caught up with them, ensuring that the tragic loss of Maricela Botello would not go unanswered. Her family continued to grieve her loss while seeking justice for the bright young woman taken too soon.
We, the jury, having heretofore found the defendant, Lisa Jo Dykes, guilty of the offense of murder as charged in the indictment.
After 7 days of testimony and only 90 minutes of jury deliberation, Lisa Dykes was found guilty of murder and tampering with evidence. Her wife, Nina Morano, faced separate charges for her involvement. Dykes showed no emotion as the verdict was read, maintaining her composure as Judge Nancy Mulder delivered the ruling. The prosecution highlighted Dykes' actions as a brutal betrayal of trust, while the defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and the investigation flawed. But during the whole trial, Lisa didn't show any remorse.
Then dumped her body after she found the 23-year-old in bed with her boyfriend, Charles Beltran, Miss Dykes' boyfriend, Charles Beltran. Maricela was visiting Dallas.
The aftermath of the trial brought a mix of relief and sorrow. Maricela Botelho's brother, Luis, delivered a heartfelt victim impact statement, sharing the pain of losing his sister. He said, "She is always taking care of us, despite us losing our sister, a beloved firstborn child, and a confidant." He described the profound impact her death had on their family, especially their mother, who continued to show resilience despite the tragedy.
Taking care of us despite of us losing our sister, their firstborn child. The fact that all of this happened, she hurt herself and my dad.
From a tale of jealousy and betrayal of a girlfriend, we move to a shocking crime that was fueled by a devastating mental health crisis.
She's accused of killing her boyfriend by stabbing him 108 times. And now there is fury over the fact that she has been spared jail time after the judge ruled she was not in control.
In May 2018, a tragic and shocking event unfolded in Thousand Oaks, California, when 32-year-old Bryn Spetcher fatally stabbed her boyfriend, Chad O'Melia, more than 100 times. What initially seemed like a brutal crime turned into a controversial legal battle surrounding mental health and substance-induced psychosis. Bryn and Chad had been dating for only a few weeks when tragedy struck on the night of May 27, 2018. The couple was spending time together at Chad's apartment in Thousand Oaks, California. They decided to smoke marijuana, a substance Bryn had little experience with. After her first attempt failed to produce any noticeable effect, Chad reportedly encouraged her to try another hit. What followed was a devastating turn of events. Bryn began to experience what experts later described as cannabis-induced psychotic disorder. She became disoriented, overwhelmed, and completely out of control. In a haze of confusion, Bryn grabbed a serrated bread knife and attacked Chad. By the time the police arrived, the scene was heart-wrenching. Chad lay motionless, and Bryn was holding the knife, hysterical and in shock. In her frenzied state, Bryn even turned the knife on herself, injuring her neck. Officers acted quickly, using a taser and batons to disarm and restrain her. Chad was pronounced dead at the scene, leaving his family and friends devastated. What began as a quiet evening turned into a moment of unimaginable sorrow, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. The tragic incident quickly gained global attention as Chad's loved ones called for justice, struggling to come to terms with the shocking loss. In the courtroom, prosecutors painted a grim and heartbreaking picture of the events that unfolded. They described the severity of the attack, highlighting the 108 stab wounds Chad suffered as a sign of overwhelming and uncontrollable anger. However, Bryn's defense offered a different perspective. They explained that her actions were not intentional, but rather the result of a rare mental health crisis. Experts testified that Bryn had experienced what is known as a cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, a condition triggered by her reaction to marijuana that night. They described how her mental state at the time left her unable to understand what was happening or control her actions.
And as I got closer to him, I saw the knife in my left hand stab his abdomen. And then it just went black.
The case left many torn. On one side, Chad's family sought accountability for the devastating loss of their son and brother. On the other hand, Bryn's legal team pleaded for understanding, emphasizing the role her mental health played in the tragedy. The courtroom became a place of emotional testimony and difficult questions, as everyone grappled with how such an unthinkable event could have happened. After years of legal proceedings, a jury convicted Bryn of involuntary manslaughter. In January 2024, Judge David Worley sentenced her to 2 years of probation and 100 hours of community service instead of prison. This decision, which acknowledged her cannabis-induced psychosis, sparked strong reactions. Chad's father, Sean O'Melia, voiced his outrage, claiming the ruling set a dangerous precedent, saying, "He just gave everyone in the state of California who smokes marijuana a license to kill someone."
I'm just so sorry that he went through that pain.
Yeah, it's
So, I don't know.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
In her testimony, that everything was about her.
Bryn and her family wept in relief after the judge's decision, while Chad's loved ones were left devastated, feeling justice had not been served. The public also went on roads for justice. The case highlighted the complex interplay between mental health, substance use, and criminal responsibility. leaving the community divided over whether Bryn's punishment fit her crime.
Bryn moved to Los Angeles to start her career as an audiologist, her hearing service dog, Aria, by her side. The two spent much of their free time.
Bryn's case highlights the complexities of mental health and justice. The next case shows how volatile relationships spiraled into tragedy.
Loved each other deeply, and they fought with the same level of intensity. And when one of them ends up dead, police have to decide if it was self-defense or premeditated murder.
On a quiet September night in 2015, Kaylee Whitehall and her boyfriend, Custon Johnson, were embroiled in a heated argument at their shared home in Kentucky. The confrontation would end in tragedy, leading to a criminal case that captivated the community and revealed the dark undercurrents of a troubled relationship. The argument began when Custon Johnson learned that Kaylee Whitehall planned to leave him. What started as a heated exchange quickly escalated into chaos, with their disagreements spreading throughout the house. Witnesses later described a tumultuous scene where emotions ran high. During the altercation, Johnson reportedly placed Whitehall in a headlock, attempting to control the situation. In response, Whitehall threw objects in an effort to free herself. The tension mounted as the conflict continued to spiral out of control.
I couldn't breathe and I felt like I was scared.
Amid the confusion, Whitehall made a critical decision. She grabbed a knife and returned to confront Johnson in the bedroom. What happened next changed both of their lives forever. In the midst of the struggle, Whitehall stabbed Johnson. Wounded and disoriented, Johnson managed to make his way to the bathroom, but his injuries were too severe. He collapsed near the shower, unable to recover from the damage inflicted. Tragically, his life slipped away shortly after. The devastating moment marked the tragic end of their relationship and set the stage for a courtroom battle that would later determine Whitehall's fate. It was a heartbreaking reminder of how conflicts can escalate with irreversible consequences. In the midst of the dispute, Whitehall stabbed Johnson. Injured and bleeding, he stumbled into the bathroom, collapsing near the shower. Tragically, Johnson succumbed to his wounds shortly after. The case reached the courtroom in September 2015, as the tragic events of that fateful day were laid bare before a jury. Prosecutors described the incident as an act of reckless violence, pushing back against Whitehall's claim of self-defense. Brittany Jones, a key witness, shared her account of what happened. She explained how she tried to step in and separate the couple during their heated argument, but was unable to calm the situation. She also testified to seeing Whitehall pick up a knife and return to the bedroom where Johnson was, a moment that would later prove pivotal in the case. Prosecutor Kim Gogegan presented a strong argument, emphasizing that Whitehall's actions didn't align with a narrative of self-defense. Detectives who investigated the crime scene further strengthened the prosecution's case. They revealed that the evidence contradicted Whitehall's initial claim of stabbing Johnson in the kitchen while he was holding her. Instead, the findings pointed to the fatal act occurring in the bedroom.
I've never been in any situation like this. I don't do anything. I've never been arrested. I go to work every day. I'm like a supervisor. I make sure, my life is perfect.
The jury listened carefully to these details, piecing together the story of what had happened. It was a tragic moment that left the courtroom grappling with questions of accountability and the choices that led to such a devastating outcome. After a 3-day trial, the jury found Whitehall guilty of reckless homicide. On November 7th, Warren Circuit Judge Steve Wilson upheld their recommendation of a 4-year sentence. Whitehall, who had remained stoic throughout the trial, returned to custody to continue serving her time at the Warren County Regional Jail.
Motion pays penalty. We, the jury, fix the defendant's sentence of reckless homicide.
Under the terms of her sentence, Whitehall is eligible for parole after serving 15% of her term, which means she could be released as early as March. This case brought heartbreak to both families involved and served as a stark reminder of how quickly domestic disputes can escalate into irreversible tragedies. Prosecutors argued that Johnson's life ended senselessly, while Whitehall maintained her actions stemmed from fear. Kaylee Whitehall's tragic crime leads to a heartbreaking loss. Next is a mysterious death that has sparked allegations of conspiracy.
And the Massachusetts Supreme Court is weighing arguments over whether to dismiss Karen Reed's murder charges. Reed is accused of hitting her police officer boyfriend with her SUV and leaving him to die.
Karen Reed stands accused of killing her police officer boyfriend, John O'Keefe, in a mysterious and tragic incident. O'Keefe, a Boston police officer with a 16-year career, was found dead in the front yard of another officer's house in January 2022. Reed, his girlfriend, has claimed her innocence, alleging that law enforcement is trying to frame her for his death. The case took an unexpected twist when a 9-week trial ended in a mistrial because the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. Karen Reed faced serious charges, including second-degree murder, motor vehicle manslaughter, and leaving the scene of a deadly accident. The prosecution was determined to try again, pledging to retry Reed for her role in the tragic death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
They arrived at the victim's home. The defendant had Ms. McCabe looked at that same cracked taillight. Ms. McCabe described the passenger side right rear taillight as cracked.
However, Reed's defense team argued that she was being unfairly accused. They claimed that law enforcement officers, some of whom were closely connected to the victim, were involved in a conspiracy to frame her for his death. The defense painted a picture of a complicated situation, suggesting that there were many unanswered questions surrounding O'Keefe's death, and that Reed's actions had been misunderstood.
To move her murder retrial to a later date. Reed is charged in connection with the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
As the case continues, the mystery deepens, with both sides presenting strong arguments. Reed insists she's innocent and is determined to clear her name, while O'Keefe's family and friends search for justice. The courtroom remains a place of tension as everyone hopes the truth will eventually come to light and bring resolution to this heartbreaking situation. The night of John O'Keefe's death started like any other, but tension had been growing in his relationship with Karen Reed. After a disagreement at a bar, Reed dropped O'Keefe off at an after-party, unaware that this would be their last night together. The next morning, Reed discovered his body outside the home of Brian Albert, a retired Boston police sergeant.
And I would note, the Commonwealth's characterization of that interview is incorrect and incomplete. I submitted additional reporting from Boston 25.
Investigators found clues linking Reed's vehicle to the scene, including a broken taillight and traces of O'Keefe's DNA on the car. The evidence suggested that Reed's SUV might have been involved in the incident, raising questions about what happened that night. However, Reed's defense team argued that O'Keefe's death could have been the result of a violent altercation at the after-party. They suggested that other people at the gathering, including Albert and his family, might have played a role. During the whole trial, Karen was just smiling as she knew that everything would be in his favor.
The judge denied the defense request to bring the jurors back to court to find out if they actually reached verdicts on those 2 counts. And now the Massachusetts Supreme Court will make a decision.
The defense painted a picture of a chaotic situation where the truth was unclear and no one really knew what had happened. As the investigation continues, the search for answers grows more complicated, with both sides trying to piece together the events leading up to that fateful morning. Despite the evidence presented by the prosecution, Reed's defense argued that the investigation was biased, particularly due to the close relationships between some of the key figures involved, including Albert's ties to law enforcement.
The sneaker was completely buried. It wasn't until we started digging through the snow that we found the sneaker.
Was a clear piece of plastic found a few feet south.
They claimed that Reed was unfairly targeted as a suspect. The judge denied a request to dismiss the charges, and a retrial has been scheduled for April 1st. Throughout the trial, Reed maintained her innocence, while O'Keefe's family and friends sought justice for his death. The case has left many questioning whether the right person is on trial, and whether justice can truly be served in such a complicated and emotionally charged situation.
You alone determine what evidence to believe. You determine the facts of this case.
The next case takes us to Melanie Lynn McGuire, whose story unravels a chilling account of calculated murder and a trail of shocking evidence that left investigators and the public reeling.
The latest and third suitcase containing human remains was brought ashore Sunday. Police got a tip from a recreational boater about its location in the water near the second island of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel.
In 2004, Melanie Lynn McGuire was living what seemed to be an idyllic life. A nurse and mother, she appeared to have everything together. But behind closed doors, her marriage to William Bill McGuire was unraveling. What started as marital discord would escalate into a chilling case that horrified an entire community.
His name was Bill McGuire.
He was a husband, a father of 2 young boys. He had 2 sisters.
The victim of a vicious crime.
It literally appeared as if though his body was cut to fit these suitcases.
On April 28, 2004, Bill McGuire vanished without warning. His disappearance puzzled friends and family, but the situation turned sinister days later when a suitcase washed ashore in Virginia. Inside were Bill's dismembered remains. The gruesome discovery would soon lead investigators to Melanie, whose actions revealed a cold and calculated murder.
There were different parts of the body. So in one suitcase, there was kind of a torso with the arms and head still attached. In the second suitcase, there was the pelvis area, and in the third suitcase, there was really the legs down.
Bill's body was found in 3 separate suitcases scattered across the Chesapeake Bay, each containing a horrifying piece of the puzzle. Melanie claimed her husband had left after an argument, but investigators discovered she had purchased a gun just days before Bill disappeared. Evidence of large garbage bags, cleaning supplies, and receipts tied Melanie to the crime, further unraveling her carefully crafted story.
The woman who was on trial for her very life. She says the real truth behind the crime has never been revealed.
With no history of violence and no apparent motive for murder.
Prosecutors argued that Melanie had drugged Bill, shot him twice, and dismembered his body to cover her tracks. The motive? To end her marriage and pursue a new life with her lover, a doctor she worked with.
Melanie McGuire, nicknamed the Suitcase Killer.
On April 23rd, 2007, I was convicted of the murder and dismemberment of my husband.
In the courtroom, the prosecution laid out a chilling narrative supported by forensic evidence. Fibers found in the suitcase matched those in Melanie's home. Surveillance footage and financial records revealed the purchase of supplies used to commit and conceal the crime. Throughout the trial, Melanie sat with an eerie calm, denying all accusations. Her composed demeanor contrasted with the shocking evidence, leaving the jury and those in the courtroom unsettled.
Guilty.
How do you find this? At the count of the indictment charging Melanie McGuire with desecrating human remains between on or about April 28, 2004 and on or about May 5, 2004 in the township of Woodbridge, Middlesex County, New Jersey, elsewhere and within the jurisdiction of this court.
Guilty.
After a grueling trial, the jury delivered a swift verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. Melanie Lynn McGuire was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2007. Bill's family described the immense pain of losing him in such a horrific way, but they found solace in knowing justice had been served.
In this case, the crime was so heinous, so cruel, and so depraved that the court finds that the maximum sentence should be imposed.
Inside the courtroom, the pain of the victim's family was unmistakable as they listened to the horrific details of what happened to William McGuire. Tearful statements from loved ones painted a picture of a man who was full of life and deeply missed. But it was Melanie's demeanor that drew the most attention.
When I remember my uncle, the first thing I see is a waterlogged suitcase. All we can ask is that you take her freedom as she took our Billy.
Throughout the trial, she maintained an air of calmness, almost eerily composed, even as prosecutors laid out damning evidence. There were moments when she appeared to scribble notes, her expression unreadable, as if detached from the devastating consequences of her actions.
Or about April 26, 2004, and on or about May 5, 2004, in the township of Woodbridge, Middlesex County, New Jersey, elsewhere and within the jurisdiction of this court.
Guilty.
During her sentencing, Melanie's composure cracked just slightly. She shook her head and whispered to her attorney, still insisting on her innocence. While the judge delivered the life sentence, she avoided looking directly at the victim's family, her eyes fixed downward. It was a moment that underscored her refusal to accept responsibility, leaving those in attendance with a haunting impression of a woman incapable of remorse. Next, we turn to the unsettling case of Iloma Curry Walker, whose actions revealed a chilling disregard for life.
The coward who did this will be caught. I am not afraid of anything. Don't get it twisted. But what happened here is outrageous, past outrageous. My prayers, my heart, my soul go out to his wife and his children. For them to lose such a loving person that I'm hearing of.
In the quiet hours of Cleveland, Ohio, a firefighter's life of service and love was cut short in a betrayal that shocked the community. William Walker, a beloved veteran firefighter, was gunned down just steps away from the home he shared with his new wife, Iloma Curry Walker. What initially seemed like a robbery gone wrong turned out to be something far darker. A calculated act of greed orchestrated by the person he trusted most.
10 years ago this month, Cleveland firefighter Lieutenant William Walker was killed, shot in the driveway of his home in what authorities would learn was a murder-for-hire plot concocted by his wife.
At first, William Walker's murder left investigators puzzled. The 45-year-old firefighter had no known enemies, and his dedication to his family and community made the crime seem senseless. But beneath the surface, Iloma Curry Walker had been living a lie. Drowning in debt and desperate to find a way out, she devised a chilling plan. Just 4 months after marrying William, she plotted his murder to claim his $100,000 life insurance policy. viewing his life as a way to erase her financial troubles. Uloma approached her 17-year-old daughter and her daughter's boyfriend, Chad Paget, to help recruit the hitman. Chad in turn enlisted Chris Hine, a young acquaintance. For Uloma, this wasn't just about money. It was about manipulation, using everyone around her to achieve her sinister goal.
November 3rd, 2013, Walker was shot multiple times in his driveway. He didn't make it.
I actually worked at Metro Hospital in the ER, and Will was my patient. So I knew he was coming in when I heard that he was shot.
On November 3rd, 2013, Uloma's plan came to fruition. William had returned home after a long day of work when Chris Hine ambushed him outside his garage and shot him multiple times. The neighborhood was rocked by the sound of gunfire, and police quickly arrived on the scene. Uloma's act began to unravel almost immediately. She played the grieving widow, but quickly raised suspicion with her calm demeanor and inconsistent stories. Investigators discovered that William's life insurance policy still listed his ex-wife as the beneficiary, meaning Uloma stood to gain nothing from the murder. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered damning evidence. Chad Paget confessed to his role, exposing the web of manipulation Uloma had spun. Text messages and testimonies revealed her attempts to orchestrate the crime and silence those involved.
Monday, Cuyahoga County Prosecutor Tim McGinty announced that a total of 5 people were involved in killing him in what he calls a murder for hire, orchestrated by his wife, Uloma Walker Curry. Investigators say Uloma was committing financial fraud in his name. They say she was afraid he might find out what she was doing and assumed she could use his life insurance to pay debts.
98191, co-defendant D, Uloma Curry. Co-defendant is pending on the docket.
Do you have an attorney? Do you have any money or funds to hire an attorney?
In 2017, Uloma Curry Walker was brought to trial. The courtroom was gripped with tension as the prosecution laid out the horrifying details of the case. Testimonies from her daughter and Chad Paget painted a chilling picture of her willingness to exploit even her own family. After just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict: guilty of aggravated murder, conspiracy, and other charges. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing, condemning Uloma for her cold, calculated actions. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And so we are just shocked and distraught. My father did not deserve this at all. He was such a great man, a great role model.
He was a great, great man, a great father, a great firefighter, a great partner. We worked together on the same fire trucks a lot.
Brian Webb remembers him as the guy who could cheer you up and make you laugh after a tough call.
I'm just really, really hurt to know that my mother was able to do something like this. It's just so upsetting. It's so sad.
In the courtroom, William's family broke down as the verdict was read, struggling to comprehend how someone he loved could betray him so completely. His colleagues from the fire department described him as a selfless hero, a man who dedicated his life to saving others, only to have his own life stolen in such a brutal way. Uloma, however, showed no remorse. Her blank expression as the sentencing was announced sent chills through the courtroom, a stark contrast to the tears and heartbreak of William's loved ones. Up next, we shift to the unsettling case of Kelly Cochran, whose chilling actions left a path of destruction and raised disturbing questions about her true intentions.
When you look into the eyes of the so-called devil woman of Michigan, what do you see?
I see exactly what I saw from the very beginning. She's one of the most manipulative people that you'll ever meet.
Her and her husband had entered into this agreement on their wedding night that if one had an affair on the other, that it was their responsibility to kill the person that they had the affair with.
On the surface, Kelly Cochran appeared to live an ordinary life in Michigan with her husband, Jason Cochran. But behind closed doors, their relationship was far from typical. The couple had made a dark and chilling pact. If one of them ever cheated, they would be forced to murder the lover. This twisted agreement would set the stage for a crime so horrifying it left investigators struggling to piece together the depths of Kelly's cruelty.
As soon as you walk into the house, the hair stands up on the back of your neck.
Something happened to him. I knew that in my heart.
Kelly wore the pants in the family, so whatever she wanted, Jason did.
In October 2014, Chris Regan, a 53-year-old co-worker and lover of Kelly Cochran, mysteriously vanished in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. He had been preparing to move out of town when he suddenly disappeared without a trace. When police began investigating, they found Chris's car abandoned at a park-and-ride lot. Inside, there was a sticky note with directions to Kelly Cochran's home. immediately placing her at the center of suspicion.
I actually was institutionalized a little over a month ago.
What happened to Chris?
With her, it was like lie, truth.
Kelly initially denied any involvement, insisting she knew nothing about Chris's whereabouts. But her behavior raised red flags. As investigators delved deeper, they discovered that Kelly and Jason Cochran had lured Chris to their home under the guise of a romantic evening, only to brutally ambush him. Jason shot Chris with a rifle, carrying out the deadly agreement while Kelly stood by.
Chris Regan went missing in Michigan's Upper Peninsula in October 2014. The investigation into his disappearance went nowhere. Cochran and her husband Jason had been questioned, but not arrested.
What began as a pact to punish infidelity soon spiraled into a nightmarish cover-up. The couple dismembered Chris's body, disposing of his remains in the rugged wilderness of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Despite their efforts, Kelly's mounting inconsistencies and the evidence pointing to her involvement kept the police closing in.
Shortly after the couple moved back to Northwest Indiana, when Jason Cochran died from an apparent heroin overdose, that the pieces began to fall into place.
After years of suspicion, Kelly's world began to unravel. In 2016, Jason Cochran was found dead in their home in Indiana, reportedly from a heroin overdose. But Jason's family believed otherwise, and an autopsy revealed that his death was intentional. Kelly had injected him with a lethal dose, silencing him permanently and ending their dark partnership.
Whom she said her now dead husband had killed, then with her help dismembered. She even led investigators to where they dumped the remains.
Out in that area? A little to the right and back towards us a little.
Now a widow, Kelly fled the area, but authorities soon caught up with her. During questioning, she made stunning confessions, admitting not only to Jason's murder, but also to helping plan and carry out Chris Regan's killing. She even claimed to have killed multiple other victims, though these confessions have never been fully substantiated.
Convicted murderer Kelly Cochran was sentenced to life in prison without a chance of parole this morning. Cochran was found guilty of first-degree murder, aiding and abetting, along with 4 other felony charges in late February.
In 2017, Kelly Cochran was convicted of Chris Regan's murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. She was also found guilty of Jason Cochran's death, adding another 65 years to her sentence. Prosecutors described her as manipulative, calculating, and devoid of remorse. A woman who not only orchestrated brutal crimes, but reveled in the chaos she left behind.
Do you have a conscience? It's just have you always felt this way?
I've always been like this, man.
Kelly's chilling goodbye letters, written shortly before her arrest, hinted at her complete detachment from reality. She referred to herself as a devil in human form, leaving no doubt about the darkness within her.
Everybody just cried, and Chris's family was sitting right behind me, and the first thing I did is just turn around and hug them.
In the courtroom, Chris Regan's loved ones sat in stunned silence as Kelly detailed the events leading to his death. The descriptions of her betrayal and brutality were almost too much to bear. Jason Cochran's family, still grappling with his murder, expressed their grief over being deceived by Kelly's manipulative persona.
If he would have never met me, he'd be here today.
35-year-old Kelly Cochran will never again walk free, convicted of killing her lover and then her husband.
Kelly's demeanor during her trial was cold and emotionless, leaving those in attendance shaken by her lack of humanity. Her statements about having more victims further horrified everyone, cementing her reputation as one of the most chilling killers to stand trial. Now we turn to the case of Nikki Sue Enzel, a woman whose disturbing crime left a lasting impact on those closest to her and continues to haunt those who heard her story.
Nikki Sue Melissa Enzel. Conspiracy to commit murder. As to the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant Nikki Sue Melissa Enzel guilty.
It was not enough that Nikki Sue Enzel was already cheating on her husband. She had to make matters worse by having him killed. On January 2nd, 2020, a frantic 911 call came in. Nikki Sue came home to find that her house was on fire. She said that she was scared that her husband was trapped inside. According to Nikki, she'd been away from home for a few days when she got a call from her husband's coworker, who said he hadn't been to work for a few days.
I came out here to check. My husband sent a text message that he didn't come in today, and I've been good 3 days, and so I'm coming here to check. And I walk in, I open the door, and I walk in the house is smoky. I can't get in the door. It's smoky in the house.
When firefighters got to the scene, they found the body of 42-year-old Chad Enzel inside his bedroom. He was pronounced dead, and an autopsy was carried out. It was soon revealed that the fire was not what killed Chad. He had been shot multiple times by a shotgun. At first, investigators believed that he had committed suicide and that the house fire was caused by a propane heater. Another investigation revealed that Chad couldn't have committed suicide, and that's when the story that Nikki gave began to crumble. The gun was found near the bed and not near Chad on the floor. It was also revealed that the fire had been deliberate after the accelerant was found in the bedroom. At first, no one really suspected Nikki. That was until security footage showed Nikki with a man in multiple places over their area. It was then revealed that this was Earl Howard, Nikki's lover.
Show that Nikki Sue Ensel and Earl Howard agreed to kill Chad Ensel, agreed to set the house on fire, to collect the insurance benefits and to cover up the murder, and agreed to tamper with evidence by destroying or disposing of that second shotgun shell and setting the fire to cover up the evidence of the murder.
Nikki had been in an affair with Earl for a while before deciding to go see him in the motel. While she denied that she hadn't been back to the house before the fire, CCTV footage soon showed otherwise. After constant interrogation, Nikki claimed that Howard was the one who shot Chad while they were struggling over the gun. She said she waited in the car. Her story changed again when she claimed that she had never seen Howard before. Despite this, prosecutors did not believe her. Howard, on the other hand, said that Nikki had shot her husband and that he offered to set the house on fire to burn evidence. Prosecutors argued that they planned to kill him and run away with his insurance money. Nikki was charged with conspiracy to commit arson, conspiracy to commit murder, and conspiracy to tamper with physical evidence. In February 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In court, she tried to appeal her sentence.
I get told I need to take a plea deal. It's going to be this way. I don't want to. I want to have my chance.
Her appeal was dismissed, and she is serving her sentence in North Dakota. Howard ended up pleading guilty to various charges, including conspiracy to commit murder and arson. In making the plea deal, prosecutors agreed to drop a murder charge. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison in February 2022. Up next, we dive into the case of Taniko Thompson, a young woman whose actions in a moment of desperation would lead to a devastating loss.
Just a little before she did what she done to my son. I can't believe this, really. I can't believe this.
Taniko Thompson, a former Atlanta police officer, was convicted of murdering her boyfriend. She showed no remorse, claiming self-defense, but evidence contradicted her story. In May 2014, Fort Lauderdale witnessed a tragic crime that shook the community. Miami police officer Carl Patrick, known for his dedication and compassion, was found dead in his Pembroke Pines home. His live-in girlfriend, Taniko Thompson, claimed self-defense, but her actions and inconsistencies painted a different picture. Carl Patrick was a dedicated Miami police officer who spent his life serving others. In May 2014, his life was tragically cut short when he was found dead in his Pembroke Pines home, still wearing his uniform. The person responsible was his live-in girlfriend, Taniko Thompson, who claimed she shot Carl in self-defense because he had been offensive. However, prosecutors uncovered troubling facts that cast doubt on her story. After the shooting, Thompson took Carl's phone, preventing him from calling for help. Instead of seeking assistance, she fabricated a pregnancy and even used his credit cards after his death. These actions painted a picture of deceit rather than desperation. Carl's mother, Lucille Patrick, was heartbroken by the loss of her son. She stood firm against Thompson's claim of mistreatment, describing Carl as a kind-hearted man who loved Taniko deeply. "My son was good to that lady and loved her so much he couldn't see the ugly in her," Lucille said, her grief palpable.
My son was good to that lady, and he loved her so much that he could not see the ugly in her.
The trial was filled with conflicting stories, leaving the courtroom divided. Taniko Thompson's family begged for mercy, describing her as a compassionate person and claiming she was a victim of mistreatment. They pleaded with the court to consider her difficult past and alleged struggles. However, the prosecutors presented a very different picture. They argued there was no proof of the mistreatment Thompson had described. Instead, they focused on her actions after the shooting, which appeared calculated and heartless, leaving Carl Patrick to die. Later, she misused his credit cards and faked a pregnancy, showing a lack of remorse and responsibility for her actions. When it was time for sentencing, Thompson addressed Carl's grieving mother. Fighting back tears, she said, "I didn't mean for him to die. I did it to defend myself." But her words didn't bring comfort or change the outcome. The family saw her apology as too little, too late. The court ultimately sided with the evidence, finding Thompson guilty. For Carl's loved ones, her actions spoke louder than words, leaving them with heartbreak and a sense of betrayal they would carry forever. In August 2016, Taniko Thompson was found guilty of second-degree murder. On November 4, 2016, she was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, but she didn't show any remorse. Judge Jeffrey Cohen delivered the sentence, bringing a sense of justice to Patrick's loved ones. The courtroom was filled with mixed emotions, sorrow, relief, and anger. Patrick's family and friends hugged, finding some solace in the verdict. Lucille Patrick expressed gratitude, saying he couldn't kill that woman, but she did it. Despite the pain, she found comfort in knowing that her son's killer would be held accountable. The case serves as a grim reminder of how deception and tragedy can intertwine, leaving behind broken hearts and unanswered questions. Breaking news! Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. Taniko Thompson's actions left a family heartbroken in disbelief. But the next case shows a story of a rising star's life murder.
To sterilize Sierra Harp to prevent any more children being born. We also ask for the highest punishment of life without parole.
Raheem Grant, an Atlanta rapper known as Red Beezy, was a rising star. He started his music career as a child and even performed at Showtime at the Apollo when he was just 7 years old. By his 20s, he was not only a rapper but also a skilled producer and recording engineer. Despite his success, Raheem's life took a tragic turn on December 29, 2017, due to a volatile relationship with the mother of his child, Sierra Harp. In 2013, Sierra Harp approached Raheem Grant for an autograph and a job. Raheem, kind and driven, hired her to promote his shows. Their professional relationship soon turned romantic, and in 2014 they welcomed a beautiful daughter, Angel. Raheem was a devoted father who always put his daughter first, but his relationship with Sierra became increasingly difficult. By late 2017, Raheem was preparing for an exciting music tour, working hard to grow his career. During this time, Sierra, who had nowhere else to stay, moved in with him temporarily. However, her behavior became unpredictable. She often had fits of jealousy, leading to heated arguments. Concerned for his safety, Raheem's mother, Geraldine, advised him to record their interactions just in case. On December 29, 2017, tragedy struck. Sierra appeared at a neighbor's house with stab wounds, holding little Angel in her arms. When the police arrived at Raheem's home, they discovered he had been shot multiple times and stabbed. Sierra claimed it was self-defense, but the evidence suggested otherwise. This heartbreaking event ended Raheem's life, leaving his loved ones to mourn a talented artist and a caring father. At first, investigators believed Raheem had attacked Sierra Harp, forcing her to defend herself. However, Raheem's mother, Geraldine, firmly denied this, explaining that her son was never a violent person. As suspicions deepened, the autopsy results revealed shocking details. Raheem had been shot 7 times, including in the back of his head. These injuries made it clear that he had been defenseless during the attack. The case took a major turn when investigators accessed Raheem's phone. What they found was chilling. In one video, Raheem documented his injuries, painfully stating, "This is what Sierra Harp did to me." Other videos, filmed by Sierra herself, showed her angrily yelling at him and trying to stage a scene to make it look like self-defense. One of the most heartbreaking moments was when Raheem, struggling to survive, was shot again. The evidence from Raheem's phone exposed the truth and provided justice for a kind-hearted father whose life was tragically cut short. It also revealed his bravery in ensuring his story was heard. On February 22, 2018, Sierra Harp was arrested and charged with Raheem's murder. During her trial, the videos left no doubt about her actions, which showed no remorse for her act. In May 2019, Sierra was found guilty of malice murder and aggravated assault. She was sentenced to 125 years in prison. Raheem's mother, Geraldine, now raises Angel, ensuring she grows up surrounded by love and away from the pain caused by her mother's actions. This heartbreaking case reminds us of the importance of recognizing toxic and dangerous relationships. Raheem was a talented artist, a devoted father, and someone who deserved a future free from harm. His legacy lives on in his music and the love his mother provides for Angel. Harp's horrifying actions remind us of the dangers lurking in toxic relationships, but the next case shows a high-profile case where love and betrayal claim self-defense collide.
I waited so long to be able to speak to her face to face, and I finally got that for myself personally, so I hope prison serves her well.
On September 27, 2020, 33-year-old Ashley Benefield shot and killed her estranged husband, 58-year-old Doug Benefield, at her home in Florida. Their troubled marriage, filled with allegations of mistreatment and legal battles, became the focus of a trial that the media dubbed the Black Swan Trial. Ashley, a former ballerina, claimed she acted in self-defense, but many questioned her true intentions. Ashley stood before the court and described a marriage marked by fear and control. She testified that Doug had been hurtful throughout their relationship, often trying to dominate her life. On the night of the tragic incident, she said an argument escalated dangerously. According to Ashley, Doug blocked her from leaving her home, advanced toward her in anger, and struck her in the face. Feeling terrified and trapped, she grabbed a gun and fired in what she claimed was self-defense. Ashley also shared that she had tried to protect herself and their child in the past. She filed for injunctions against Doug in 2018 and 2020, accusing him of mistreatment and seeking to keep him away from their child. However, no criminal charges were ever brought against Doug, and one of the injunctions was still unresolved when the incident occurred. The prosecution, led by Suzanne O'Donnell, argued against Ashley's claims. O'Donnell pointed to the physical evidence, noting that Doug's bullet wound came from the side, suggesting he wasn't facing Ashley when he was shot. The prosecutor accused Ashley of staging the event to gain sole custody of their child and claimed her grief during the trial was an act to mislead the court. The trial of Ashley Benefield was filled with twists and intense moments that captured everyone's attention. During the proceedings, Ashley's defense team raised concerns about potential issues with the jury. They claimed one juror might have withheld information that showed a bias, while another was accused of sharing details about the trial using a cell phone. These allegations created a stir, but the judge carefully reviewed them and decided to dismiss both claims, allowing the trial to continue. As the case unfolded, Ashley's claim of self-defense came under heavy scrutiny. She testified that she feared for her life when her husband, Doug Benefield, allegedly attacked her, but the evidence didn't fully back up her story. Prosecutors argued that the physical evidence, including the direction of the bullet wound, didn't align with her version of events. This raised serious doubts about whether she was truly acting in self-defense or if her actions were premeditated. In the end, the jury made their decision. They did not believe Ashley was completely innocent, but they also didn't find her guilty of second-degree murder. Instead, she was convicted of manslaughter, a lesser but still serious charge. It was a pivotal moment that shaped her future and brought some closure to Doug's grieving family. On December 3, 2024, Ashley Benefield was sentenced to 20 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation. As the sentence was read, Ashley reportedly showed no emotion. Doug Benefield's family, however, felt justice was served.
I'm going to sentence you to 20 years in Florida State Prison. That's to be followed by 10 years of probation.
Doug's daughter, Eva Benefield, gave a heartfelt statement during the hearing. "My dad was the best man I have ever known in my entire family," she said. "I hope prison serves her well." The family expressed relief that Ashley was held accountable, though they also mourned the loss of Doug, a father and friend whose life ended in tragedy.
My dad was the best man that I've ever known in my entire life, and he will continue to hold that in my mind and in our family's mind forever.
Where Ashley Benefield's case involved a complicated mix of claims and counterclaims, it highlights the devastating impact of household conflict when violence becomes the resolution. Ashley Benefield's trial captivated the nation. The next case is even more harrowing, where a tragic loss changes lives forever. On September 8, 2021, the peaceful Gulf Breeze community was shaken by a devastating incident. U.S. Navy Chief Petty Officer reports a heated argument with her husband, Colin Turner, over their 3 children. By the end of that day, Colin Turner, a loving father and Marine veteran, would be dead, and Kuhn would face charges of first-degree premeditated murder. Bree and Colin's relationship had grown increasingly tense over the years, and September 8, 2021 would mark a tragic turning point. That day, the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office received multiple calls. The first 2 calls, one from Bree and the other from Colin, described heated arguments but revealed no clear signs of physical violence. Deputies arrived and left each time, seeing no reason to intervene further. Later that evening at 6:22 p.m., a third and final call came through. Colin, sounding distressed, told dispatchers that he had been locked in the garage by Bree. He described how she had tried to harm him when he attempted to re-enter the house. Then, during the call, a loud bang echoed in the background. "She just shot me," Colin yelled during the call, as stated by police. Colin's voice is filled with pain and fear when he's on the call. What followed was even more horrifying. 3 more gunshots rang out, and then there was only silence.
What was that? He just shot me! She just shot him. I just heard 4 shots.
By the time deputies returned to the scene, it was too late. Colin Turner, a Marine veteran and father, had lost his life in a tragic and irreversible moment. The events of that day left a community shocked and a family forever changed. Bree was arrested and charged with murder, leading to a trial that revealed 2 very different versions of the truth. Her defense team described her as a woman trapped in an offensive marriage. They claimed Colin, a Marine veteran with a traumatic brain injury, had been emotionally and physically harmful towards her. They argued that years of suffering had caused Bree to fear for her life and the safety of her children. Her lawyers cited battered spouse syndrome, explaining that Bree acted out of desperation. However, the prosecutors painted a starkly different picture. They argued that Bree's actions were not out of fear but premeditated and deliberate. They presented compelling evidence where Colin's final moments could be heard. Testimony from Bree's brother, Eric, further raised questions about her defense, casting doubt on her version of events. For 4 days, the jury listened closely as both sides made their cases. Despite interruptions caused by Hurricane Helene, the jury returned with a clear decision. Bree Kuhn was found guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. The verdict marked the end of a heartbreaking trial that left a family grieving and a community grappling with the tragedy. Circuit Judge James Duncan sentenced Bree to life in prison without the chance of parole. Still, she had no remorse for her act. She didn't think about her 3 children, witnesses to the tragic events, who were placed in protective custody. This story serves as a painful reminder of the devastating consequences of unresolved conflicts and the mistreatment of household chores. While Bree claimed she acted out of fear and desperation, the evidence painted a picture of a tragic choice that cost Colin his life and shattered 2 families. The next case brings us to Isabella Martinez, a teenager whose actions revealed a dark and disturbing side beneath the surface.
I don't need an attorney.
You don't need an attorney?
No.
Well, I beg to disagree with you. You have a right to represent yourself. In our Constitution, you have a right to represent yourself.
On July 6, 2017, a chilling 911 call was made from a home in Loganville, Georgia. When Gwinnett County Police arrived at the scene, they found a tragic sight: 5 lives lost. The victims included her husband, Martin Romero, 33, and their 4 children: Isabella, 10, Dakota, 7, Dylan, 4, and Axel, 2. A 5th child, Diana, 9, had also been stabbed but survived after undergoing emergency surgery. The Romero family had recently moved into a quiet neighborhood in Loganville, Georgia. By all accounts, they seemed like a happy and close-knit family. The children were often seen playing with friends and were described by neighbors as bright and full of potential. However, beneath this peaceful appearance, tragedy was brewing. Isabella Martinez, the mother, reportedly sank into a deep depression after the death of her father, which seemed to change everything. On July 16, 2017, the unimaginable happened. Isabel made a 911 call admitting she had stabbed her husband and children. When police arrived, they found 5 family members dead and another child, Diana, critically injured but alive. The shock didn't end there. During her first court appearance, Isabel behaved in ways that puzzled everyone. She smiled for the cameras, gave a double thumbs up, and even knelt in a prayer-like pose. Her actions baffled the court and viewers alike. The judge sternly told her to stop, but she shook her head and laughed. When asked about legal representation, Isabel refused an attorney, saying her faith and the people would defend her. It was a chilling display in a case that left a community heartbroken and searching for answers.
A Georgia prosecutor will not seek the death penalty for a woman charged with stabbing her husband and 4 children to death. 34-year-old Isabel Martinez pled not guilty to all charges in a Gwinnett County courthouse today.
The police quickly launched a thorough investigation after the devastating discovery in Loganville. They uncovered that Isabel Martinez had brutally stabbed her family in the early hours of the morning. Shockingly, she confessed to the crimes without hesitation. However, what happened in the courtroom left everyone even more baffled. During her sentencing, Isabel's behavior was nothing short of bizarre. She smiled, waved to the cameras, and even gave a double thumbs up.
Smiling the creepiest smile, gave the jury a thumbs up, and started moving as if she was praying.
She swayed in her seat, held her hands together in a prayer gesture, and appeared completely detached from the severity of the situation. Her strange reactions unsettled everyone present, including the judge, who had to warn her to stop performing for the cameras. Many people began to question what could have driven her to commit such a horrific act. Some experts speculated that Isabel might have been struggling with severe mental health issues, perhaps triggered by the recent loss of her father. Others were left wondering how such an unimaginable tragedy could happen in a seemingly normal, happy family.
I just went cold. I couldn't believe that what had happened. I mean, when they said that there had been a tragedy, I thought maybe a car accident or something.
After a thorough trial where she showed bizarre reactions to her act, Isabel Martinez was convicted of 5 counts of murder, aggravated assault, and child cruelty. She received a life sentence with the chance of parole plus 21 years.
To cut out the display for the cameras,
The loss devastated the community, leaving family, friends, and neighbors grappling with an unimaginable tragedy. The surviving child, Diana, faced a long road to recovery, both physically and emotionally. For many, this case serves as a stark reminder of the hidden pain that can lead to unimaginable actions. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. Isabel's brutal attack on her family is impossible to forget. The next case shows the tragic loss of a daughter, leaving us questioning a mother's unimaginable actions.
Just be careful and watch out who you're talking to and watch out who's around you and be suspicious of everything.
On a cold November day in 2014, a tragedy unfolded in Nashua, New Hampshire that would leave a lasting impact on the community. Caitlin Marin, a 27-year-old mother, was convicted of killing her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage. The details of the case were so heart-wrenching that they would haunt everyone involved. Brielle Gage was a sweet, innocent little girl whose life ended far too soon. During Thanksgiving week in 2014, she suffered severe injuries that took her life, leaving her family and community devastated. At first, her mother, Caitlin Marin, claimed that Brielle had fallen down the stairs, but the truth was far more heartbreaking. Investigators soon uncovered a different story, revealing that Brielle had been subjected to unimaginable mistreatment. She had been kicked, punched, and even slammed against a wall. The injuries on her small body told a harrowing tale. Over 50 bruises and wounds showed just how much she had endured. Prosecutors explained that Marin's anger had spiraled out of control. They said she became enraged when Brielle had wet herself and later went to the kitchen at night to find food. What should have been simple moments of childhood became the trigger for a violent outburst.
You just can't keep the story straight. The only person afraid of the truth is her, Judge. And why? Because the truth is she's a killer.
Despite all the evidence, Marin insisted she was innocent. She chose to stand trial without a jury, putting her fate in the hands of a judge. The tragic loss of Brielle and the circumstances surrounding her death left the community in shock. During the trial, Senior Assistant Attorney General Jeff Strelzin painted a grim picture of Caitlin Marin, calling her a skilled and manipulative liar. He explained how Marin had carefully tried to cover her tracks, but the truth of what happened to her 3-year-old daughter, Brielle Gage, could not be hidden. The courtroom was heavy with sorrow as the details of Brielle's slow and painful death were revealed. Prosecutors shared how the little girl suffered more than 50 injuries, leaving everyone in shock and disbelief. Among those present was Martin's mother, Kathleen Emery. She bravely spoke to the court, her voice filled with heartbreak and sorrow. Kathleen expressed her deep pain, not only for the loss of her beloved granddaughter, but also for her daughter, Caitlin. She mourned the reality that Caitlin would now spend the rest of her life behind bars, far from the life she once knew.
Mom says, no, Ma, don't touch her, don't talk to her. Her doctor said when she cries for no reason, you can't acknowledge her.
The tragedy of Brielle's death left a lasting impact on everyone. In December 2016, Marin was found guilty of second-degree murder. Judge Charles S. Temple sentenced her to 45 years to life in prison. He called Brielle's death horrific and expressed hope that her tragic story would serve as a wake-up call for society to better protect its children, while Marin showed no remorse.
I feel sorry. This is the rest of her life in prison.
Judge Temple called Brielle's death horrific.
And they say while she did talk to police before she was read her rights.
That's why when you get to the station, you don't tell her, you don't have to talk to me.
No.
And that's why you don't make any efforts to provide to her a phone to contact her attorney.
Brielle's death was a devastating reminder of how fragile and precious life is, especially for children. It sparked changes in child protection laws in New Hampshire, ensuring that Brielle's suffering would not be in vain. Though justice was served, the community will forever mourn the loss of a little girl whose life was stolen far too soon.
Pray for her family, for her siblings, because they have to live through it.
Caitlin's ruthless murder shocked the community. The next case shows an unspeakable cruelty that took us into a tragedy that took 2 young lives.
I just received a call from my child's mother that 2 of my youngest 2 dead babies, my sons, are dead in an apartment.
In 2017, a heartbreaking and horrific tragedy unfolded in Atlanta when Lamora Williams, a mother of 3, killed her 2 young sons, Jacarter and Keontae. The devastating incident shocked the community and left many struggling to comprehend how a mother could commit such an unspeakable act. Lamora Williams, a 24-year-old mother of 3, called emergency services in a state of panic, saying she had found her 2 young sons dead at home after leaving them with a caregiver. Lamora described a terrible scene to the 911 dispatcher, saying that the stove had fallen onto her youngest son's head, and her other son was found on the floor with what seemed to be severe injuries. She was frantic, asking for help and insisting that she didn't know what had happened. The situation seemed tragic, and the dispatcher could hear the desperation in her voice.
I'm so scared. I don't want to get locked up because I was at work.
Okay, ma'am.
I
understand that you're scared. I completely understand, but I need to get some help out there to you now.
As police arrived and began investigating, things started to look different. The details of the scene raised more questions. The officers found the children's bodies, and some marks seemed like burns. The investigation led to a shocking discovery. The 2 boys had been placed inside a tipped-over oven and left there for an extended period. This heartbreaking revelation changed everything, and the truth about what happened that tragic day began to emerge, leaving everyone in disbelief. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities began to uncover the heartbreaking truth about what had happened. The 2 young boys had died from severe burns, and the evidence suggested that their heads had been deliberately placed inside an oven that had been tipped over. The autopsy provided even more details, showing that the boys had been exposed to extreme heat for a long time before their tragic deaths. The burns they suffered were unlike any natural accident. All the evidence began to point towards Lamora Williams, the boys' mother. What had initially seemed like a tragic accident now looked like something far more sinister. The police and investigators worked tirelessly to piece together what had happened, and the truth about the mother's involvement in such an unimaginable crime slowly became undeniable, leaving everyone stunned and deeply saddened by the outcome.
We know she was in the building somewhere in a back room, but she chose not to appear directly in front of the judge. So you're looking at video from a previous court hearing.
Lamora Williams was arrested and charged with the murders of her 2 sons. In 2024, she was convicted on 14 counts and sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole, in addition to an extra 35 years for other charges related to the case. Still, she shows no remorse for her actions. She chose to remain silent during the whole trial.
Of concealing a body and 1 charge of lying to police. Williams is accused of killing her 1-year-old and 2-year-old in October by putting them in a hot oven.
The case left the community in shock and sorrow, struggling to comprehend how a mother could carry out such an unimaginable crime against her children. The heartbreak was felt by all who followed the story, especially as Williams maintained her innocence, claiming mental health issues contributed to her actions.
And it's for them, and show them that we there for him.
Lamora Williams' senseless violence shattered lives and left loved ones grappling with unimaginable loss. The next case shows how kindness can quickly turn into horror.
I am certain
de que siempre vivirá en nuestros corazones.
That she will always live in our hearts.
This is the tragic story of Daniela Tabares, a 21-year-old woman whose life was abruptly cut short by an acquaintance she had just met. Daniela was killed in an unthinkable act of violence after a night out with friends from her gym, a night that was supposed to be full of fun and laughter. Daniela was a friendly, supportive member of a gym in Coral Springs, Florida. She was known for her kindness and easily made friends with everyone around her. One evening, during a gym outing, Daniela noticed that Yvonne Serrano, another gym member, had been drinking heavily. Serrano didn't seem to connect with the others, and Daniela, always the caring person, decided to offer her help. She offered to drive Serrano home after the night out. However, as the evening went on, Serrano's behavior became more intense and agitated. Her drunken state made everyone uncomfortable, and it became clear that she wasn't handling herself well. Despite the unsettling vibe, Daniela, trying to do the right thing, decided to drive Serrano home to make sure she was safe. But that decision would have devastating consequences. Hours later, police discovered Daniela's lifeless body in Serrano's driveway with a gunshot wound to her forehead. The investigation revealed the shocking truth, leaving everyone who knew Daniela in disbelief. What happened that night? What went so wrong?
Reduce the charges from second-degree murder, which would have carried a no-bond hold on it.
Prosecutors told the judge her soon-to-be ex-husband said when Serrano drinks, she blacks out.
The investigation into Daniela's death uncovered unsettling details. Yvonne Serrano, a woman with no criminal history, gave conflicting statements when questioned by the police. She first claimed that she didn't know how Daniela's body ended up in her driveway. Serrano told officers that she had found Daniela's car there when she was leaving for the gym, but her story began to change. As the investigation continued, Serrano admitted that she had been at the bar that night, drinking heavily. She told the police that she had blacked out, making her memory of the night fuzzy. Her story seemed inconsistent, and the authorities began to suspect her involvement. Further investigation revealed troubling evidence in Serrano's home. A gun was found, and there were signs that she had deleted footage from her Ring doorbell camera, which might have captured crucial moments. The discovery of this evidence raised more questions about Serrano's role in Daniela's tragic death. The inconsistencies in Serrano's statements, combined with the physical evidence, left investigators believing she had a part in what happened that fateful night. Daniela's family and friends were left searching for answers, trying to make sense of the tragedy that had stolen Daniela's life.
Or to give the suspect a ride home. She gave her a ride home. The vehicle pulls in the driveway, and at some point the suspect did shoot the victim and kill her.
Serrano was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with evidence. However, prosecutors later reduced the charges to manslaughter with a firearm, a lesser charge that carries a maximum 30-year sentence. Serrano pleaded not guilty, that she's not guilty of her act, leaving Daniela's family and friends devastated by the turn of events. Despite the change in charges, Daniela's mother, Isa, and those who knew Daniela continued to seek justice for her tragic death.
Good morning, Ms. Serrano. You're charged with 2 counts. The first is tampering or fabricating with physical evidence. The second is second-degree murder.
The story of Daniela Tabares' untimely death has left a deep emotional mark on her family and friends. Daniela's mother, Isa, finds herself grappling with anger and frustration, knowing that no matter what happens in court, her daughter will never return.
Ahorita
Estamos a la espera de la sentencia.
Isabel Taveres, the victim's mother, said she watched while a jury spent more than 2.5 days deliberating before arriving to the guilty verdict.
Yvonne's heinous case leaves everyone in shock and disbelief. The next case exposed shocking cruelty that caused irreversible damage.
Happen without her? Absolutely not. She's the way that they get into the apartment. She never would have opened the door for Michelle Lambert. She helps tackle her. She holds her down while Lambert's stabbing her to death.
In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a woman named Tabitha Buck was sentenced to life in prison for the 1991 murder of 16-year-old Lori Sho. Buck, just 17 years old at the time of the crime, along with her accomplice, Lisa Michelle Lambert, lured Sho's mother out of their apartment and brutally slashed Sho's throat. After nearly 28 years in prison, Tabitha Buck was recently released on parole, which has sparked a lot of debate and emotions. Tabitha Buck's story intertwines with Lori Sho's, which began as a typical tale of small-town life, but ended in an unspeakable tragedy. In the summer of 1991, Lori, a bright and kind teenager, briefly dated Lawrence Butch Youngkin. However, Lori later confided to her mother that Youngkin had harmed her. Their relationship ended, and Youngkin returned to Lisa Michelle Lambert, his pregnant ex-girlfriend. For Lambert, Lori became an obsession. Driven by jealousy, she began harassing Lori, showing up at her workplace and spreading rumors. Lambert's friend, Tabitha Buck, joined in the aggression. Buck physically attacked Lori multiple times, including a violent confrontation at a mall. Lambert's malice turned methodical. With Buck's help, she gathered information about Lori's schedule and obtained her phone number. On December 20th, 1991, Lori was brutally attacked at her home. Her mother, Hazel, had been lured away by a staged phone call. Lori sustained fatal injuries, but managed to identify Lambert as her killer before succumbing. Police arrested Lambert, Buck, and Youngkin that day. Lori's death remains a haunting reminder of how jealousy and hatred can spiral into violence. Tabitha Buck was granted parole after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that life sentences for juveniles were unconstitutional. This ruling meant that her sentence was revisited, giving her a chance for release after serving nearly 28 years in prison. Some people believe that everyone deserves a second chance, especially those who were young when they committed their crimes. They feel that Tabitha's time in prison allowed her to change and learn from her mistakes. However, for the families affected by her actions, this decision is difficult to accept. The Sho family, in particular, is left facing old wounds as they remember the brutal crime that took Lori Sho's life.
But a very, very effective one, the odds of my client meeting a personality like that, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1.
Lancaster County District Attorney Craig Stedman shared how painful it has been for victims' families, even though the court was just following the law. The decision raises a complex issue. Should someone who committed a serious crime as a juvenile be given a second chance? While the law sees potential for rehabilitation, the emotional weight for those who have suffered from the crime remains heavy. This situation leaves everyone questioning the balance between justice, healing, and the hope for redemption. Tabitha Buck's parole was granted after she showed good behavior during her time in prison, completed programs to improve herself, and took responsibility for the crime she committed. Despite these positive steps, she must follow strict rules now that she's out. She's not allowed to have contact with anyone who uses substances or with the family of the victim, Lori Sho. She must also attend regular mental health evaluations and, importantly, she can't go back or even visit Lancaster County, where the crime happened. Some people believe that this is a fair chance for Buck to rebuild her life, especially since she was so young when she committed the crime. However, others feel unsure about whether someone who took the life of another person, especially so brutally, should be allowed back into society. For the victim's family and others affected, it's hard to accept that someone who caused so much pain could now be free. It's a complex situation where the law offers a second chance, but it still leaves many with mixed emotions and questions about justice and forgiveness.
Tabitha Buck was 17 years old when she was sentenced to life in prison for the brutal killing of 16-year-old Lori Sho in Lancaster County.
Tabitha Buck is now a free woman, but her release doesn't erase the trauma caused by her actions all those years ago. While she serves her parole under strict conditions, the emotional scars for the Sho family and others affected by the case remain. This case highlights the complexity of juvenile justice and whether it's possible for someone to truly change after committing such a crime.
The surviving family members were told that the sentence was final, and in cases like this, that it was life without parole. And
Tabitha's journey ahead will not only be one of legal challenges, but emotional healing for all involved. The emotional reaction to Buck's release is mixed. For some, it brings hope that people can change, even after making terrible mistakes. For others, it feels like a reminder of the deep pain caused by the loss of a young life. The release of someone who committed such a violent crime against another person is difficult for many to accept, particularly for the victim's family, who are left to process the hurt once again. Next, we turn to Chloe Driver, a case that highlights the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions.
I see her everywhere, in everything. She lives on and shows me that beauty can be found anywhere.
On December 8, 2020, in the quiet neighborhood of Canton, Georgia, police responded to a harrowing scene. A 13-month-old baby girl, Hannah Nicole Driver, had been brutally killed. Her mother, 24-year-old Chloe Driver, was arrested at the scene after attempting to take her own life. Chloe, accompanied by a group believed to be part of a traveling cult, stopped at a home in the Mountain View neighborhood. Shortly after arriving, Chloe took a knife, locked herself in a bedroom with Hannah, and stabbed her daughter 4 times. The baby's father desperately tried to save her, but tragically, Hannah was pronounced dead on the scene. Chloe survived her self-inflicted wounds. When the case was trialed, her defense rested on an insanity plea. She claimed that her mental illness had driven her to commit an unthinkable act, a tragic moment she said she could barely comprehend herself. Her defense painted her as a deeply troubled young woman, overwhelmed by struggles beyond her control. But the prosecution told a much different story, one that sent chills through the courtroom. They described a mother whose behavior after the crime showed no sign of remorse. Instead, they portrayed her as cold and indifferent to the unspeakable loss of her child.
I wanted to see if she was okay because, I mean, she was running from them. And then they had got a hold of her and was dragging her back to the apartments that were right there.
The trial was deeply emotional. Police officers who had first arrived at the scene gave tearful testimonies, recounting the devastating moment they found 13-month-old Hannah. Jurors struggled to contain their emotions as they viewed crime scene photos and body camera footage, each image revealing the heartbreaking details of the baby's final moments. In the end, the courtroom was filled with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. The innocence of a baby lost and the unimaginable actions of a mother left everyone grappling with the weight of the tragedy, their hearts heavy with grief and disbelief. The 6-day trial of Chloe Driver was a heartbreaking journey through the tragic loss of 13-month-old Hannah. Over 21 witnesses came forward, and 135 pieces of evidence were presented.
I am being forced to get into a truck with Bionca Ellis or Brian Joyce to see my daughter again because he has kept her away from me.
He's the next of kin in this case, so our office makes contact with the next of kin to the victims, and we had done that on occasion. Okay.
Along with it, including chilling 911 calls and crime scene photos. Each day in court revealed more details of that fateful day, leaving everyone grappling with the unimaginable. Chloe's defense focused on her mental health. 3 psychologists testified about her profound struggles, and Chloe herself spoke, expressing deep regret for what had happened. Her lawyers argued that her mental illness clouded her judgment and drove her to a tragic act that she could never undo.
Guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill. Count 5, cruelty to children in the 1st degree. Guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, but mentally ill.
But the prosecution painted a starkly different picture. They described Chloe as a mother who showed little care for her child, even during the trial. They pointed to moments where her behavior seemed cold and inappropriate, arguing that her actions showed a troubling lack of accountability. They highlighted how her choices led to Hannah's heartbreaking end, leaving no room for excuses. The courtroom was filled with grief and conflicting emotions. The evidence told a painful story, but the memories of baby Hannah brought a shared hope of justice and healing to the wake of such an unspeakable tragedy.
You were attempting to save her life, and that he was attempting to save Hannah's life.
Yeah, he was.
Did you care about Kuwani and Hannah?
Of course.
Do you still care about them?
Yeah.
The jury rejected Chloe's insanity plea, finding her guilty but mentally ill. She was convicted of malice murder, felony murder, child cruelty, and aggravated assault. Judge McKellia sentenced her to life in prison with the chance of parole plus 20 years, while acknowledging the trauma inflicted on everyone involved. During the time of trial, Chloe gets emotional as she feels guilty for what she did to her daughter.
This state would dictate that you would serve 30 years of a life sentence before you were considered for parole.
This case struck at the deepest levels of human emotion. A mother tackling her child's life is an act that defies comprehension. The community mourned the loss of an innocent baby while struggling to understand the profound darkness that led to this tragedy. During the hearing, the father of the baby said, "This woman took my daughter's life."
Where I sat for 3 months in a van just screaming and screaming and screaming that this woman believed that she was entitled to take my daughter's life out of this world.
Chloe Driver's heart-wrenching crime devastated a family. Breaking news: Evil Lives Here now has merch. Support the channel and grab your gear today. Check the link in the description. But the next case takes a dark turn with a shocking betrayal that led to the death of a husband.
And it has been so hard to go through all of this for the last 3.5+ years after what I went through.
On a quiet day in 2012, tragedy struck a family in Carlsbad, California, when Julie Harper was sentenced to 40 years in prison for killing her husband. Julie Harper, 39 at the time, shot and killed her husband, Jason Harper, in their upstairs bedroom. Meanwhile, their 3 children were downstairs, unaware of the horrific event unfolding above them. Julie claimed that the shooting was an accident, a desperate act of self-defense during a heated argument. She testified that Jason, an athletic and spirited man, charged at her, and the gun went off unintentionally. However, the story is not like that. Investigators uncovered troubling details, including Julie's preparation of a getaway bag filled with passports and cash, suggesting she planned to flee.
Harper told them to look in a blue backpack now at his house for attorney's fees. Inside, nearly $40,000 in cash.
Julie Harper's case took a dramatic turn as it unfolded in court. At first, during her initial trial, she was acquitted of first-degree murder, leaving her family and the public divided over what had truly happened on that fateful day. According to Julie, her husband mistreated her for years, and on that day he was doing the same. But in a retrial in 2015, a jury reviewed the evidence again and found her guilty of second-degree murder for the death of her husband, Jason Harper.
Julie Harper talked about the day she killed her husband. She said she and her husband Jason started fighting about money in their bedroom when he got violent.
The judge handed down a 15-year to life sentence, but an additional 25 years were added because Julie had used a firearm during the crime. This brought her total sentence to 40 years to life, ensuring she would spend decades behind bars. Years later, Julie sought to shorten her sentence, citing a new California Supreme Court ruling that allowed judges more flexibility in reducing firearm-related penalties. She hoped this could give her a chance for an earlier release. However, the prosecution firmly opposed her request, arguing that Julie's actions, including disposing of the murder weapon and preparing a getaway bag, made her a danger to public safety. They believed her sentence should remain intact to reflect the seriousness of her crime. On a quiet Thursday morning, the courtroom fell silent as Superior Court Judge Blaine Bowman made his final decision. Julie Harper, who had been convicted of killing her husband Jason, sat anxiously as the judge upheld her original 40-year to life sentence, rejecting her appeal. The prosecution painted a clear picture of Julie's actions, emphasizing the troubling details surrounding the case. They pointed out that Julie had never shown genuine remorse for taking Jason's life. Adding to the suspicion, the murder weapon was never found, and evidence suggested Julie had intentionally gotten rid of it.
Grabbed me by the arms, began shaking me forcefully.
Julie says she feared for her life.
Prosecutors also highlighted that Julie had prepared a getaway bag with passports and cash, which they argued showed she had plans to flee after the tragic event. These actions, they claimed, reflected a calculated attempt to escape responsibility for her crime. Judge Bowman agreed, stating that reducing Julie's sentence would not serve justice. His decision was met with quiet relief by Jason's grieving family. Though the courtroom proceedings concluded, the emotional weight of the tragedy lingered. Jason's loved ones left the courthouse with heavy hearts, finding some solace in knowing that the sentence upheld the memory of a life taken too soon. Julie Harper was sentenced to 40 years to life for killing her husband. Jason's family, including his mother Lena, expressed relief at the decision, insisting that justice for Jason must be served. They believe Julie should serve at least as many years as she took from her husband's life.
For a total term of 40 years to life in state prison. Do we have, and from probation, quit your appearance for probation, I failed to get that.
There wasn't a hint of remorse, only a quiet determination. She explained each of her actions with clarity, revealing that every choice she made was driven by the instinct to protect herself. It wasn't recklessness or malice, it was survival.
Allows the judge discretion over the gun allegation, which added 25 years to life to her sentence. It was mandatory in California until just this year. Now her turn to appeal it.
This heartbreaking case left a family shattered. For Jason's loved ones, the memories of his vibrant personality were overshadowed by the devastating loss. While justice brought some closure, the emotional scars remain. Even Julie's children show remorse for their dad, saying to their mother that, "I don't want to call her mom." Justice was served, but the scars of this tragedy will remain forever.
Julie would usually be asleep.
You called your mom Julie, is that right?
Yes.
Is that what you call her now?
Yes.
How come you started calling her Julie?
Because I don't want to say that she is my mom.
The next case takes us to Michelle Kehoe, a mother whose actions left a chilling mark on her family.
We still love Michelle as a wife, mother, and friend, and hope that she receives the treatment that she needs.
In October 2008, Michelle Kehoe, a mother from Coralville, Iowa, drove her 2 sons to a secluded spot near Littleton. What followed was a horrific act that would leave one of her sons dead and the other severely injured. Michelle taped their eyes shut and then slashed their throats with a knife before attempting to take her own life. In October 2008, Michelle Kehoe took her 2 sons to a quiet, secluded area near Littleton, Iowa. It was a trip that would change their lives forever. In a shocking and heartbreaking moment, Michelle, in a fit of anger and confusion, taped their eyes shut and then attacked them with a knife. Tragically, her 2-year-old son, who was too young to understand the horror around him, lost his life to the brutal wounds. Her 7-year-old son, however, showed incredible strength and resilience. Despite the terrifying attack, he survived and, as difficult as it must have been, he courageously testified in court about what happened that day. Initially, Michelle tried to shift the blame, telling authorities that a stranger had attacked them. However, the truth soon came out. After some time, she admitted that she was the one responsible for the tragedy. The boy's bravery and the heartbreaking loss of his little brother left the community in shock. It was a devastating moment for everyone who knew the family, especially as a mother was the one who caused the harm. Despite her confession, the legal system had to carry out its duty to ensure justice for the surviving child.
Guilty of murder in the first degree, dated November 5, 2009, by Anthony L. Buter, presiding juror.
As Michelle Kehoe's trial began, the case became more complicated than anyone expected. Despite her confession, Michelle's defense team argued that she wasn't mentally fit to stand trial. They believed that her troubled mental health played a significant role in the attack, and that this should have been a central part of her defense. Her lawyers claimed that Michelle wasn't in the right state of mind when she made the confession to the police, and that her statements should not have been used against her.
Strategy to get, quote, your story out through the experts, because then you wouldn't be subjected to cross-examination.
The defense also argued that her attorney during the trial had failed to properly protect her rights, especially when it came to the statements she made while in the hospital. According to them, these statements were influenced by her mental health struggles and should not have been admitted as evidence. The defense hoped that the court would consider her mental health history and show mercy, acknowledging her struggles. Despite these claims, the court ruled otherwise. The judges determined that Michelle understood what she had done, the charges against her, and the process of her trial. They found that her confession was given voluntarily, without coercion, and that she was fit to stand trial. The Iowa Court of Appeals rejected her appeal, confirming that Michelle Kehoe was fit to stand trial. The judges concluded that she understood the charges against her and had voluntarily confessed to the crime. In the end, Michelle was convicted of murder and attempted murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of parole and is currently serving her sentence at the Mitchellville Women's Prison.
Society has overall suffered because of your actions and because of the decisions that you made.
As the trial went on, Michelle became overwhelmed with emotion. The weight of what she had done hit her hard, and as the evidence was presented, she started to lose her composure. Her voice shook, and tears filled her eyes. It was clear she now fully understood the seriousness of her actions and felt deep regret.
And I want to express my deep sorrow. I hope that was for healing, for Sean, for June, for my friends and family.
This tragic case left a community in shock. The horror of a mother turning against her children is almost impossible to comprehend. While the surviving son's courage in testifying helped secure justice, the grief of losing a young life and the trauma of surviving such an attack will stay with him forever. The case also highlights the importance of mental health and understanding the complexities of crime and justice. The shocking behavior of these female killers in court paints a haunting picture of their violent acts. Their courtroom reactions and the twists in their trials highlight the complexity of justice. But the story doesn't end here. The next video reveals more chilling cases and the consequences that followed. Keep watching.